I, Allison Gorell, do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support the Constitution, the laws of the United States and of the state of Colorado, the municipal code and the ordinances of the city of Brush, and that I will faithfully perform all of the duties pertaining to the office of Counselor, Ward 1, to the best of my ability.
Very good. Thank you. Well, congratulations. All right, just a reminder for everyone to silence your cell phones. If you're online, mute your phones until you want to speak up. And we will start with roll call vote. A roll call.
Mayor Sherman.
Here.
Councilor Gorell.
Here.
Councilor Klinkhammer. Did you hear it?
I heard it, Susan.
Yeah, we'll turn you up a little bit.
Councilor Klinkhammer, I'm just getting my sound check.
Yep, I'm here.
Oh, yay, there you are.
Councilor Lundstrom.
Here.
Councilor Spradlin.
Here.
Councilor Stroud.
Here.
And do we have any corrections or revisions to the agenda? There aren't any. Motion to approve the agenda?
I move we approve the agenda.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call vote.
Councilor Lundstrom.
Yes.
Councilor Spradlin.
Yes.
Councilor Klinkhammer.
Yes.
Councilor Gorell.
Yes.
Councilor Stroud.
Yes.
Mayor Sherman.
Yes. And we've all had a chance to read through the minutes from the last meeting, January 10th, 2022. Do we have any corrections or revisions? Is there a motion to approve them?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? Roll call vote.
Councilor Spradlin.
Yes.
Councilor Gorell.
Yes.
Councilor Stroud.
Yes.
Councilor Klinkhammer.
Yes.
Councilor Lundstrom.
Yes.
Mayor Sherman.
Yes. Next, we have visitors and delegations. We have time for citizen comments. If there's anyone present who would like to address council on any issues that are not part of the Westwood development public hearings that are on tonight, now is your chance. Nobody? Okay. So our first management item is our public hearing for the proposed rezoning. And Rick Robulian will give us a report.
Good evening, council. So some of you are on the planning board, have already had a chance to kind of go through this and vet this. So for those who haven't, this will be new information for you. And excited just to be able to share some things. I know you've had a chance to review your packet. Before we get into the packet, I just want to kind of go over a few things to kind of help set the table of what is going to be present tonight. I made just a very generic PowerPoint slide just to kind of help me stay on pace. And I know tonight's going to be long, so I'm not going to try to be as long as last time, but I will try to at least be as thorough. I just want to, before I get into this, I want to share, this is a big decision for our city, and I have not taken it lightly. I spent a lot of time thinking through this, meeting with staff, discussing this, but there's three things that have helped guide my understanding of the magnitude of this decision. And the first off is our comprehensive plan. That should guide us in all things that we do. The second is our council priorities and what is important as we set through those agendas of what becomes the things that we're going to write. I mean, there's a lot of things, but we can't do a lot of things, so we set priorities. And then third, our city code. What does our city code say, and then we're bound by that. So I spent some time just scouring through the comprehensive plan, and it is a little dated. It's 2007. We're in 2022, which is crazy. But it still has valuable information that still guides and steers the direction of our development. So I want to just bring to your attention, highlight, some of you know this, but remind you of some things that have been steering us. Housing has always been an issue. It's been an issue back then. It said 97% of all the housing was already vacant, or not vacant.
Occupied?
Occupied. It was occupied. It was struggling with needing a place for our future developments. Westwood was looked at. It was considered our future development of our city. And it was very interesting that there were two main growth periods in Brush. Before 1939, there was a huge growth where we had over 400 homes built. And in the 1970s, we had another huge growth period where we had over 400 homes built. And in between those two periods, it's kind of up and down, little bits at a time. And then since then, a little bits at a time. And we are sitting on something that is significant that would be up there with major development for Brush. This is a major subdivision. Our guides that help steer us for development, I want to highlight a couple things that have helped guide me as I've been thinking about this development is being vetted well through the developer and through the staff. But one of the goals, I'll mention a few goals on this, maintain and enhance quality residential environments in Brush. They didn't want to see a bunch of homes that would be coming in that would devalue our city. And so it was always a goal. And the way that we do it is it says that we would create policies to make sure they are aesthetically pleasing, safe, and livable. So that was one of our goals, to create things like this. Second important policy was to promote high-quality new residential neighborhoods which are livable, safe, and an asset to our city that we'd be proud of. And also, review and revise design standards as needed to encourage development of high-quality new housing developments. So if our code was distracting from that or deterring from that, we need to be thinking through that. Another one was protect existing and non-residential development from encroachment by incompatible land uses. So what are these things that could hinder this? We need to look at these things and adjust policy. Another thing that was a guide is promote and construction of new homes in Brush to accommodate growth and better meet the demand for housing in the city. It's a good goal because we're struggling with it. And let me pause for a second. In our meetings that we've had with CML, we had a district meeting, and every community that's around this area is also struggling with residential housing. And then I went to the big meeting, and it's across the state, is a highlight that the state is struggling with housing right now. There are communities in desperate need crying out for developers to come, and we have a developer, so just keep that in mind. This is a wonderful thing for our city to have, knowing that we're struggling across the state to try to find housing. A policy that to kind of help encourage that was encourage city and private sector partnerships to facilitate desirable residential development. So that's what we're going after, is desirable residential development. A strategy was to promote a variety of desirable housing types. We don't want to see the same kinds, and so that's one of the things that helped guide us. Achieve a mix of housing types and densities in order to meet the diverse needs of our citizens. And that's exactly what this development is, just to highlight that. It's an issue. We have lots of different diversity, and we want to make sure that we're providing housing for all types. Applying flexible standards to undeveloped residential land to allow a range of residential developments, types, densities, and price points. And I think that that is something to note, that that's exactly what we're doing through our policies and strategies. And lastly, to encourage a variety of residential densities in the neighborhood designs. That's been one thing that has helped guide us in this process. Another thing that has helped guide us is, which I'll put up here, is our council priorities. And so we've heard from our comprehensive plan. This is really important that we should be thinking through this. Second is you guys helped steer this into becoming a priority, and it was on our list. Address housing challenges and ensure availability of a variety of housing types was important, and it's one of our highest importance for us to be thinking through. So I want to highlight that. And then lastly, our city code. Our city code has a range of zonings for residential uses. And you have low density, which are more of your larger homes. You have your medium density, which are designed for smaller type homes, smaller yards, not extremely small, but they're smaller. And then you have your medium high density, which are even smaller, but it's more designed for multi-families, apartments, townhouses and so forth. And then we have setback standards that kind of help us keep consistency across our city. 20-foot setbacks, normally for front, 15 rear, 5 side. So between homes is 10 feet. That's the minimum. That's standard across our city. And in fact, it's pretty standard across the state. So I know that is something I want to address that is part of our code. Our code also highlights how we do developments. So we have opportunities to do mixed developments. Those are special, that's outside of our code, and those are called planned unit developments, which is what we proposed last time that we decided to pull away from and present this one. This is a different one. That's the only time in our code that you can adjust our city code standards in a PUD, a planned unit development. This specific one is conventional code. It's held and bound by what our city code does, from our setbacks to how streets are designed, landscaping, utilities, easements, everything is already spelled out in our code. So we decided to go in that approach. So I want to highlight that. In our planning and zoning meeting, what I decided to do, which is what I'm going to do tonight too, is explain before we get into our packet, explain a little bit about the narrative of what they're proposing to do. Narrative is kind of helping you see the overall picture. This is kind of similar to what we did last time, but in the luxuries that you have with a PUD allows you to do mixed zonings and have mixed development. So the proposal from last time was single-family housing, apartments, and commercial. And so in a PUD, you can design all of that together. One of the major hindrances to that project was open space requirement. And that was for like recreation. Our code specifies 25% that is necessary in a PUD. Well, that's a hindrance for this project because they don't have that kind of space. So they decided to go by code. Code says 15%. That's the minimum that you have to dedicate for open space requirements. So they decided to pull away from a PUD and do conventional code. It gave them a lot more flexibility. So that's what we have tonight. We have an opportunity for them to do a development, but it's going to be, instead of one large development, they're going to break it up into 3 separate developments. So I want to just highlight that. And I'm going to give you an example in the zoning part to kind of show you. This is the end goal. So when they're finished with their 3 developments, this is what it would look like. So a PUD, you could have done it all together. Whoops. Sorry. A PUD, you could have done all this like the way it's proposed. Actually, it's this part right here. But we're doing separate developments, so we're only focused on this part right here, which is the single-family portion. But their end goal is to look like this. They have a single-family portion. They have a mixed family, which is the apartments, and then they have a commercial section. So keep that in mind as we're doing the development, because if not, then our code would hinder us from being able to do this because it's not one project, it's 3 projects, 3 different developments. So I want to go into the zoning component. You have your staff report. I want to share just to make sure that we're doing everything according to code. The code requires us to send mailers, and that's what we're bound to do that. So we had a mailer sent to every home that was 300 feet around the proximity of the development. This was mailed on December 10th, and so every family got one. We double check to make sure every family in that, around that, according to what the code says, to get one. This is a map showing what was sent to the county, and that's what was sent to us to do. And then on top of that, they gave us a list of every address, and then we broke it out to, owner, and so everyone was sent. So that was met according to code. We're also required to publish this in the newspaper, and so this article was published, and I had on a picture, but it's sideways, and so instead of showing you a sideways picture, it was published in the Brush Tribune December 15th and December 22nd. And it was also published in the Fort Morgan Times December 13th and the 20th. So that satisfied code requirements to make sure the public was aware this was going. Also, what was required is to post on the property, and we placed it in 6 different areas around the property so that anybody who was driving around this, no matter what part of the parcel, they would see it, that it was going to come for a hearing. And so we took pictures of it actually being posted. So that's just one of the signs. And so the requirements were met so that the public can be aware of it. So according to the report, highlights, it's 61 acres is the site. The developer, Developers Incorporated, I know it says Greeley, but you've moved since then. I have the wrong address on here. What is your current address for the company?
It's,
Colorado Springs. Okay. A summary of the request is that they request to propose to change the land use, and here's what the current. So sorry, this is the. Let's see, that's proposed. Oh, I took it out. Sorry, I had 3 of them up here. The proposed is to turn this whole development right now, because our code requires if it's going to be a single development, before you do a preliminary plat, it has to be zoned appropriately. So that's what's proposed tonight, is to rezone the entire site medium density, so that then we can do the plat for medium density. Because currently it is medium density, and this is multi-family, and then this is the commercial. So they're not doing anything that's different. It's already zoned medium density. And so medium density, what does that mean? It means, according to our code, the minimum lot sizes have to be 4,500 square feet. And then setbacks are all the same, 20 feet front, 15 side, 5 side, 15 rear. So that's the same. What Jay is proposing through LDI will exceed our minimums for our code. So even our code is 4,500 square feet minimum. All of his lots are going to be larger than that, but they'll be smaller than a low density. Low density is 7,500 square feet, and his will be between 6,500 and 5,500. And so it's going to be larger than what our code requires, but smaller than the low density. And this is not low density, this is medium density. And then again, I just want to bring your attention, it's already medium density. So we're not changing it to anything else but medium density. So he has met the requirement to present a site plan with a sketch plan and then preliminary plat. Open space requirements show that it's 15%. He has 15.6% dedicated, which is 7.04 acres. There's going to be 204 lots, so this is significantly smaller than what his first proposal was last year. He's got 52 feet lots and 62-foot front lots. And so out of the 52-foot lots, there's 146 lots, and out of the 62-foot front lots, there's 58 of them. They'll have 4 phases, and you can see that in each phase you'll have a mix of 52 feet and 62 feet lots. And the total phase for the first development will be 51 lots. The second phase will consist of 49 lots. The third phase will consist of 52 lots, and the fourth phase will consist of 52 lots. This is all contingent upon them hitting their goals to make sure that they have the access to 34, the access to 26, County Road 26, and that the homes are being purchased in a timely manner. Because if that slows down, then the whole process will change and slow down too. So, just to remind you too, according to code, they have on November 8th, 2021, they have submitted and paid for their application, which is $200 for this fee, and they have gone according to code to submit all the requirements for application. We are not looking at the sketch plan. We're going to look at a preliminary plat, but the sketch plan will also be somewhat significant for this. What is up for discussion and decision for tonight is to take the planning and zoning's recommendation to move forward, which was to rezone the whole plot into median density. What is not up for discussion tonight is a lot of the details of what the development will look like. And so that, all those kind of things are spelled out in what's called a subdivision improvement agreement. And that's where we decide terms from what exactly is the city going to do, what are they going to do, what are home styles and guidelines going to look like. Is there going to be an HOA, a homeowners association? What will that look like? That's not for discussion tonight because that will happen in the next phase. Usually, according to code, what you have is you submit your application, you submit a sketch plan, then you take it to get rezoned, then you submit preliminary plat, which will be preliminary engineering, and we'll look at that in just a minute for that next hearing. But once you do the preliminary, then you take it before council to get approvals. After that, now you have this next phase, which is to determine the terms of how it's going to be constructed. We're looking at just the land use right now for the land to be developed to do building. The SIA will spell out landscape plans. It will spell out specifically, there's a lot of things that it looks at, and I'm going blank right now, but incentives for the city of how we're gonna, what we're gonna promise to help along do things. What we're not answering right now is what types of utilities are gonna be in there, because that will be determined in the SIA. We're not gonna be talking about what the sign's gonna look like for the neighborhood. We're not gonna go into the weeds of those things because that will be determined next. It has to be determined before the next stage, which is called final plat. Final plat is we have everything figured out. The final engineering confirms, the city approves. We're moving forward to the terms have been spelled out and agreed upon, and that's when we will come back to you with final plat. We can't come to you with final plat until an SIA subdivision improvement agreement is agreed upon. So what we're looking at is to do the zoning in order to change to do the plat. So that's what's up for discussion tonight. I'm just going to wrap it up because we'll get more details in the preliminary plat. So staff has reviewed the proposed project in accordance with the land use code and specifically the major subdivision development standards and regulations, as well as consistency with the comprehensive plan and compatibility with surrounding properties. And based on the analysis provided through this review, we have made recommendations for City Council's consideration. So you have 4 options that you can decide on for the zoning. The first is to approve the request as submitted. The second is approve the request subject to conditions. The third is to deny the request. Fourth is to continue the request subject to additional information. If there's something else that needs to be worked out, we can continue the meeting and go forward. So, staff recommendation. If City Council accepts conclusions from the discussion as presented in this staff report and testimony presented in public hearing, then staff recommends the following. City Council moves to recommend planning and zoning is what has already brought this up, but I recommend the City Council approve the rezoning for the Westwood Village.
All right, thank you, Rick. So, we will invite the applicants to do a presentation. Jason Joyner, do you want Mr. Schmidt? And, did I forget to open it? Okay, we've opened it. Okay.
In a public hearing. And then we we've heard staff support, and now the applicant's free to present if you wish.
Mayor and council. My engineer who is supposed to be up home with his children because they've all been quarantined today. He is on, it's not Zoom, it's a go-to meeting, okay? So, Shane is my combination of land planner and civil engineer on this development, Westwood Village. Let me start by going back a step to them. I need to introduce myself and give you my address and so forth. So my name is Jay Stoner, and my company and my home address is 5655 Bridal Spur Ridge Place in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Shane, are you there, Shane?
I am here. Can you hear me?
Yes. Do you want to start off with your presentation, and then I'll step up and fill in any blanks and answer questions?
Yep, that sounds great. Hi, my name is Shane Boyle. I'm a resident of Fort Collins, Colorado, and I'm the civil engineer / planner on the project. And I apologize for not being able to make it in person and meet you guys personally. As Jay mentioned, I unfortunately found out about 3 hours ago that my children and my family was found under quarantine. So I'm sitting at home in the basement on my couch, which is a lot more comfortable than where you guys are. But thanks for the opportunity to present this project to you. It's a great, well, it's sad that I don't get to see you in person, but nice that we can at least still get to chat via GoToMeeting. And I think that, honestly, Rick's presentation was really good. He did a good job of laying the outline out for you. A couple things that I did want to highlight is, I know you guys have seen this project once before, and what you saw before was a lot more dense than what we're proposing now. Rick mentioned that as well, but we also had some commercial components in the form of storage units. We had some other things on site. We had a lot more apartment and twin home product on site proposed. And so we've backed off of that a lot and reduced the density on site. And we've also done, in my opinion, a better job of orienting the road network. As part of this development, we're providing road connections to Highway 34 and then also County Road 26. And we've designed the internal road layout in such a way that we're purposely funneling the residents of Westwood Village out onto those roads rather than providing an opportunity for them to use the adjacent neighborhood, the existing neighborhoods as their way out. And then in addition to that, we're also providing other ways for those existing neighborhoods to exit. And so we're allowing a road system that purposefully gets people out onto the major roads rather than having to weave their way through neighborhoods in order to get to work and get to school. And then the other thing is, I think, Rick, you did a good job of touching on the difference between a planned unit development and a traditional major subdivision. The other thing I wanted to highlight, or there's a couple things I wanted to highlight on that, is that with a planned unit development, a developer is allowed to essentially generate some of their own rules when it comes to things like road widths and lot widths, lot dimensions, things like that. And so most communities in Colorado are going away from the planned unit development purposefully because they don't like the differences that you can get in developments. They don't like what some have viewed as substandard developments by allowing narrower roadways, for instance. And so by going with a traditional development, we're giving Brush exactly what you're asking for with your city code. And we're providing lots of street widths that are easy to maintain and are easy to plow and easy to drive. We're also also providing, lot widths that are in excess of the zoning, requirements that we're falling under. And then the last thing I wanted to highlight, it may be hard to show up on the map that Rick was showing, it's just a little gray line, but we're also providing a lot of interconnectivity throughout the development and around the development in the form of trails. And some of those will be informal, pressure-fine walking trails, some of those will be concrete trails, and we're really trying to build a sense of neighborhood here, where people can walk to the neighbor's house 3 blocks away using trails that aren't actually on the street, and interconnect the different green spaces and the different parks through a trail system that gets people off of the roadways and into more of a neighborhood feel. And I think that's really it. So with that, Jay, unless you feel like there's something else I should touch on, I'll turn it over to you.
One question that I think I was in error last, during the planning and zoning meeting is we're working to try to maximize the number of homes that can have, basements. And, because there's a lift station involved in this neighborhood, because the sewer line is up here and the basements will be down here. So we've got to run the sewer to a lift station, then lift it up and then force it to get it to a point where it can gravity feed back to your sewage treatment plant. And Shane and I are in discussions right now to try to figure out a way to get more of the neighborhood, if not all of the neighborhood, access to a sewer line for a basement. And that's a process that comes during the final approval, not at the preliminary. So, but I wanted to touch on that because I know that was an interest of the city council before, was we want to be able to offer basements, and we're working to accommodate as many as we can, if not the whole neighborhood. But that has it, and does that explain where we're at right now pretty well, Shane?
It does, Jay.
We're
Okay.
just doing zoning, so we'll talk about that.
Yeah, so that's my first question is, at this moment, we're just talking about zoning, and then we're gonna have another next, to talk about the planning. So I guess, I've got some things to explain. While I'm up here, let me give you a quick history of my company. We've been in land development and new construction in northern Colorado for, this year will be 45 years. We've managed dozens of land developments and been involved in constructing thousands of homes. So this isn't our first rodeo. We know how a good neighborhood is developed, and I'm proud to say of the dozens of developments that I've been involved in my company has developed, 100% of them have been successfully completed, and they're considered an asset to each of the communities. Mostly in Fort Collins and Larimer County, but then Greeley and Severance, Alt, lots of different neighborhoods around northern Colorado. Recently we were invited to come to Wiggins about 5 years ago, 5.5, and that looked like a silly idea based on the history of new homes being built in Wiggins. Over the last 10 years, there was an absorption of 20 houses, 2 a year, and we were talking about building 335 homes and 48 apartments. And it was a leap of faith, really, but after talking to the local businesses and after understanding the Morgan County issue with housing, we thought, let's try it. And in 5.5 years, we're sold out of 335 homes, 48 apartments. And one of the things I like to point out about Kiowa Park, is the name of that neighborhood, is we put a lot of thought into the covenants, which we will do with Westwood Village. We've already drafted them, and they're very strong covenants. They really have a lot of teeth in them. 97% of the people will never need to worry about the covenants. They're really designed to address the 3% of the population that seems to not play well with others. So, but they're written in such a way that if you don't behave, we'll do something about it. And I like to tell a story about a neighborhood we did in Fort Collins called Eagle Ranch Estates. And we had covenants, and we had architectural guidelines, and we had rules. And there was this one builder that came into town, and he didn't think he needed to abide by the rule. And so he didn't even submit for architectural approval. And he went and dug a hole, and he got a letter from our attorney saying, you need to submit what you're going to build before you go any further. You need to stop, and you need to submit so we can go over it, make sure it meets all the guidelines. He didn't stop. So then we took it to the next step and threatened him with a restraining order. He didn't stop. So then it ended up, to make a long story short, he ended up going back out there, and he was handcuffed and arrested. So, and interestingly enough, several years later, we worked it out after he did spend a night in jail. He wanted to cooperate. So we got together, we worked it out, he designed and built a beautiful home. And a few years later, I was in a restaurant in Greeley, and there he was. His name's Ray, and he saw me, and I thought, I wonder how this is going to go. He ended up buying me a beer, and we had a really nice talk, and he said, you know, a lot of people do these covenants things and these architectural guideline things. You're one of the first people that I've ever dealt with that actually enforces them. And that is our philosophy, is we're not going to just talk the talk about covenants and architectural guidelines. We're going to walk it, and we're going to enforce it. And then, like I'm doing right now with Kiowa Park, we're sold out in Kiowa Park, but I'm still on the board of directors as a mentor, and I'm educating the volunteers from the neighborhood on how to run a HOA, you know, and they're doing a wonderful job. I mean, it gives me goosebumps because they're really taking the ownership, and they're doing a great job, and that's what we're going to do in Brush. We're going to build a great neighborhood, and it's going to get handed off to the HOA and I'll stay on the board for as long as it takes until they're up and running. But all of our neighborhoods have been a success because of that whole process. We work very hard to not just build the neighborhood, but make sure it's an asset to the community, to the people that live in the neighborhood. It's a good investment. Our neighborhoods perform well, and then ultimately, it's kind of like having a child. You know, if you raise them right and teach them good, you know, fundamental philosophies of how to live, you can let them go and they do well. So that's a little bit of a history of our company. So I hope you support us. We really want to help Brush with their housing. I was out here 2 years ago, at least, at the golf course, and we had a luncheon. We invited anybody that'd like to come and give us their thoughts on what does Brush need for housing. And we had I think we had at least 50 people there. And it was definitely, I had a survey that I handed out to all the people at the luncheon, and we had about 16 questions we asked, and it was so apparent that Brush desperately needs housing. During the meeting, well, the survey showed, I mean, it was great, and really all types of housing, affordable housing, non-owner occupied housing, nicer, luxurious kind of housing, everything is needed in Brush, which is exciting. I'm glad that we can maybe help out Brush. But during the lunch, a couple of employers, I honestly don't know what business they were in, but they kept coming up to me and showing me a text message from somebody they just interviewed and offered a job to. And during lunch, there was 2 or 3 text messages sent back to the employer saying, we really appreciate your offer, but we can't find a place to live, so we're going to have to decline. And the guy's looking at me like, can you do something here? Because we need housing in Brush. And that's exciting for me. I mean, I've been doing this for close to 50 years, and I'm just as excited about doing this project in Brush as I am anything I've done in my career. So, look forward to working with you. I'll sit down now and finish up the zoning part, and then I'll visit a little further with some of the details about Westwood Village. But thanks for your consideration, and we look forward to helping you with your housing needs. Thank you.
Thank you.
And do you have any questions for me regarding zoning? Okay, I'll be here for the next round.
I just want to highlight a couple things before we move forward. When our staff, like Jay had mentioned, we've been working on this. We've been working with LDI for over 2 years, and we put a lot of time in this, and we have vetted it well. We've heard when we went through the Planning and Zoning Commission the first time, we came back and addressed a lot of the major concerns. And one of the concerns that we heard from them, well, I'll mention a few of them, did not like 100% modular homes, manufactured homes. So that is not on the table. He's come back with a whole different project, and we'll get in details of that, but I just want to make sure you understand, because if it fails in zoning, then we can't go any further. But it's too much that's on this meeting right here. It's not modular homes, it's 100% site-built homes. They have addressed, the first project was 2% open space. This is 15% according to our code. So he's addressed major issues. We talked about really wanted to be aesthetic, something we can be proud of, something that would be interactive with the community, and he's put a pathway system completely around the whole edge of it, and then there's different green spaces that's going to be all throughout the community. So he's come back with a totally different project that has addressed almost all of our concerns that we had from that first Planning and Zoning Commission. So it's consistent with what's around the area. It's not doing anything different. It'd be one thing saying if this was low density and now we're making it medium density. It's already medium density. We're not doing anything differently than what our code is. There's too much that's riding on this. And just saying that our staff has spent so many hours on this. That's myself, Monty, Dale, Colbert, for looking at all the utilities. We've got our staff engineer or consultant with the staff. Chad's looked at this. We have spent 2 years developing this to this point. And so I'm very thankful that we are at this point. And to be roadblocked at the last minute would be insane. So I just want to communicate of how we have come to this point with a great recommendation from Planning and Zoning, and I'm just excited to be able to move forward. And if there's some issues, we can work that out before we go to the final plat. So,
Can I just clarify one thing?
yes.
So we're voting to zone this medium density, but right now, it's part of it's commercial. We just don't have the
Yes.
existing.
Yeah, the commercial part's
Commercial
like this
part's like right around,
whole,
along
it's
the
like
bottom.
this whole lower south end.
Yeah. So we're voting to get rid of the commercial.
This here's all.
Yeah.
This here's actually.
Yeah. So we're looking to take out all of that commercial and make it all medium
Yeah,
density.
so that's the way it was, but if you go back to our comprehensive plan, it was all residential. That was the proposal for us to be guided to make it.
Okay.
Rick, I got a quick question. There is a little bit of proposed commercial, right?
Mhm.
Is that something we just address later on?
Correct, that's gonna be a different development.
Oh, okay.
So this is the first development, and which was right here, if you look at how I'm highlighting this,
Okay.
that's the first, that's tonight. The next development, once we get through this will be the next one. This is gonna be your multifamily apartments.
Okay.
And then this section right here in the pink is the commercial.
So we're only doing the.
We're only
apartments.
doing this side.
Well, that's
Right.
what, for the extent, the rezoning is all the way to the extent.
Yeah, for today, we have to rezone the whole entire property in order to redo
Okay.
a replat.
And then just address the other portions of that.
Correct, and we'll have to
down
come
in a
back and rezone that.
Separate section.
and then rezone that one separately too.
Okay.
So it's it's taking more steps, but it's taking the appropriate steps to make sure we can get the development that we're both comfortable. Our code says that's what it takes, but then it allows the development to come back and still do what we're still saying. We still need apartments, but we can't do it with this development.
Sure, okay.
Thank you, Rick. Okay, now we have the public testimony part of our hearing. Members of the public have the opportunity to make statements either in support of or in opposition of the ordinance. Anyone addressing council must first come to the podium and please state your name and address before making your comments. Each party giving testimony will be given one opportunity to speak and must direct all questions regarding the application to the mayor. Do we have anyone that would like to speak?
I'm Bart Yenter. I live at 25545 US Highway 34. So I was here 2 years ago, and none of you guys were, and so, sorry. I think the changes that have been presented sound a whole lot better than they did 2 years ago, so I'm not really that concerned about that. But 2 years ago I mentioned to you that one of the reasons I was here, I'm on the ditch board. I'm on I'm the secretary of the Upper Platte and Beaver Ditch, which is right along Highway 34, would be on the south edge of this property. And we had a real bad experience in Fort Morgan, just to the east of where the bus barn is, and the old sewage treatment plant was there. We didn't get invited, the ditch company didn't get invited to the change of zoning or the plat, and all of a sudden the developers tearing our ditch bank apart, and it was over 10 years of litigation and over $250,000–300,000 that we were out, and really it's fixed now and the best it could be, but I just want to avoid that nonsense if we can. The other thing that I guess before we weren't talking basements, now we are, where that ditch is, it's actually the brush lateral, but it's part of the Upper Platte and Beaver, and on the brush lateral board as well. Would hate to have something all of a sudden we're the bad guys because there's water in the basements. Don't know if that's a concern or not, but again, the main thing I guess is when, and this isn't about the plat, I know it's about the zoning, but when the plat thing, we got to make sure we got, because this ditch has been there, well, the Upper Platte and Beaver was formed in 1880s, and brush lateral's not quite that old, but we have an easement that goes as far as it needs to be to maintain the ditch. I think it's 75 feet. It's not, what the right word is, it's not a prescribed easement, but it's there for the ditch company. So anything that's within there is trouble, and that's what, I mean, there's a road in Fort Morgan right up next to the ditch, and it shouldn't have never happened. So
Thank you.
that's all I got, unless there's any questions.
No, I do know that that's been taken into consideration. I think, I remember from the last time, and I remember talking about this one, that they have taken all of that in consideration. I'll let maybe Rick.
Yeah, I was just saying, we from our first development from 2 years ago to this one, we have made sure that the housing, when they're platted, they're further back so that there would not be anything that would be developed that would hinder or cause issues with that ditch. In fact, even the landscaping, that will be spelled out clearly in the SIA, Subdivision Improvement Agreement, so that there's nothing going to get in that ditch. The only thing that we have that's close would be a walking path, but that's not going to be, it's not going to be stone, or, I mean, it's just going to be a walking path for people to enjoy. It's not going to hinder the ditch, and that's still not in their right of way.
What about the new road going over the ditch?
That will have to be determined before development. That's an access point on 34 and access at Yellowstone 34 and Edmonds and County Road 26. So those are conditions that we'll put in the SIA.
think what we also talked about before going to final, that we would have, a written letter from the ditch company saying that everything that they've looked at with the plans
Yeah.
are good up for them, just so we have it in writing as well.
Yeah, well, that's the last thing we want is more litigation or issues with the companies. We want to make sure that you guys are aware and sign off for that. So, okay. Any other questions?
Thank you. Do we have anybody else that wants to?
I have something quick, if it's appropriate for me to ask a question real quick at this point, based on the ditch.
Okay.
I just want to assure council that I am very familiar with working through ditch companies and crossing agreements and things along those lines. And so we will absolutely do everything we need to do in order to make the ditch company whole. And if, Jay, if you wouldn't mind, if you could get the contact information from the gentleman who just spoke, I'm afraid I don't have his name, then I can reach out directly to him and we can work through any concerns that he may have as we get into the engineering.
That would be great. Thank you.
My name's Chuck Miller, 26060 Morgan County Road S, just south or north of the proposed zoning change. I realize this portion of the hearing is for the zoning purposes only, and as you're aware, I have a ditch on the west side of the proposed area, and it's a lateral ditch, different than the brush ladder. And it solely serves me with my ditch water, and I was here 2 years ago or whenever you did it last, and requested that be part of the requirements in approval, is that an agreement be done. And you would sign off on that, and we would all be in agreement, and that would be part of the requirements. Also, I might add, as to the brush lateral, as Mr. Ginther spoke, I'm also a member of that. And it's my recommendation that there be some kind of hold harmless agreement done for the ditch company in the event that water started showing up in basements and things of that nature. I think your engineers, both the project engineer and the engineer firm that you have hired, will tell you that the natural flow of underground water is right from the ditch right through that subdivision to the northeast. And that's the natural flow of the water, so I would strongly recommend that some type of hold harmless agreement would be developed for that. Yes, I've got to know Jay, and he is a good developer. He has done numerous things around the country, but we also must keep in mind our school districts and funding that is allowed for our school districts when developments come into our towns. And there are options there. It's unfortunate the school district is not present tonight to bring that to your attention, but I believe they have a board meeting themselves, so it's a little conflict there. The accesses on Highway 34 and Road 26, of course, 200 plus homes creates lots of traffic. Yes, I fully expect that the speed of the traffic will go down to 25 mile an hour like it is everywhere else. Yes, Highway 34, it's going to be a real challenge. So maybe we should get ahead of the curve and talk about that, because we're talking about turning lanes that they're going to require and a number of other things. Do we know where they're at with their rebuild project that was supposed to go out past that area? They've kind of vacated that, but when they came to town and talked about the area they got done, they had another phase that went west. I believe they were looking at proposed clear to Dodd Bridge Road. And so we've got a situation there with the ditch and the amount of highway there that turning access is going to be difficult. And talking with those people, they have some real concerns as well. When we talk about covenants and HOAs, as we know, the City of Brush nor the County of Morgan does not enforce covenants or HOAs. It's strictly on the people that reside into a planned community development. And so the neighbors to the north of this subdivision stood up here and talked to you about their covenants and their HOA, and they've done absolutely nothing. They've let the weeds grow this tall. I do have to give credit to Jay Stoner. He called me and said, who can I hire to take care of the weeds this last summer? And he did take care of the weeds on half of that. And but we have a situation, the neighbor to the north, you haven't enforced anything there. And I strongly suggest that the city figures out something. If we're gonna start developing in the town of Brush to this magnitude, the city of Brush, I strongly recommend that you figure something out to enforce these HOAs and in these planned developments, and the covenants. Covenants can be written however somebody wants them, but until they enforce them, and they're made to enforce them by the city, I don't know what you do about it. And that's where you're at right now, is you have no enforcement, it appears. I guess in closing, the process that you're trying to do here does allow the developer more latitude throughout the project. And that was stated. You also talk about the comprehensive agenda of the town of Brush. And I want you to recognize that you're doing a planned development or getting ready to approve a zoning change for planned development in the #1 growth area to the city of Brush. The #1 growth area to the city of Brush. I purposely bought out there because I saw that back in 1985, that it ended up being the #1 growth area. And as long as there's growth that increases the value of property, I'm 100% for it. But the minute we start building cracker boxes like we allowed in the subdivision between my property and the proposed property, we've decreased the value. And I told you that, I told the council that, not you, none of you were on the council at that time. But I brought that up to the council ahead of that development, and it is absolutely trashed the neighborhood. And I'm sorry to say that, but it's absolutely trashed the neighborhood. So, thank you for your time, and I'm trying to figure out how to get on the notification list. I believe I'm within 300 feet, and I did get notifications 2 years ago, but I did not get any notifications at this time on this meeting or the planning and zoning. And yeah, at 6 o'clock in the morning, it's dark, I can't see the signs, and I don't read the newspaper. How do you get on the notification list?
Websites on there.
Website, Facebook.
Well, isn't it your job to notify me I'm within 300 feet? I'm not?
Check the county.
Okay. So, is there a special way to request email notifications of future hearings or anything of that nature?
We put this in.
Okay, is the answer yes or no? If the answer is no, that's all I need. If the answer is yes, I can give my address.
Do you have an email address or something you
Yes,
can share with our
yes.
staff?
That's
I
a
think
good-
we can.
I'm sure we can find somebody that could email you.
Thank you.
Yep.
C. Miller at ama-auctions.com.
Chuck, I just have one quick question for you, if I may. You had mentioned the school district and them not being here, but I had missed your concern in regard to the school district. Can you just clarify that, please?
There are numerous incentives that can work through projects that are developed within municipalities that create revenue for school districts. I am not fully prepared to address that, nor do I believe that I am a qualified individual to address that. I believe the school district should be making that statement, and I would just suggest, and I'm sure Mr. Stoner has plenty of knowledge about this with all the work that he's done across the country. So, yes, there are incentives of school districts which we know that our school district is in future deep trouble from a tax basis. So,
The city, we already have the agreement and the discussions with the school districts on impact fees. And also the school districts worked with Jay already, had some discussions, and that'll be part of the SIA on how those are collected for the school district.
that we've already addressed it.
Thank you, Chair.
any other questions? Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I'm Steve Griffith. I live on 16841 County Road 26, so I'm south of this development. I'm here to speak solely probably on the ditch. I'm president of the Upper Platte Beaver. I'm concerned with the liability when you put that many houses next to a ditch. There's safety, that's always an issue, but water's gonna be the biggest issue. At any given time, you could have 40 CFS running right by this property. Okay, that's 18,000 gallons per minute in that ditch. And you've got 1.5 miles of highway when you get a downpour that, guess where it goes? In that ditch. That ditch is the drain for the highway. So, if you get some extreme weather that fills that ditch, and that ditch breaks, who takes that liability? You gonna ask the ditch company to take the liability that's been there since 1880? Or somehow are we gonna come up with an agreement that if that ditch were to break due to a natural disaster, the ditch company's not liable? It can happen. We've seen it. We've seen water. Now, nobody cares when it breaks because there's nothing there. But if it's your house or your basement, you will care. Whether it's right or wrong, you're gonna care. And if your basement's full of water, you're gonna be concerned, or somebody's gonna be at fault, you know. So that's my concern. I don't know as if that part of it has been looked at. I don't think anybody's looked at the 100-year rain or flood coming down that ditch. So I would suggest somebody look at that, because it could be a lot of water. Because if we already have irrigation water in the canal and we get a downpour, that canal starts at Log Lane Village. 12 to 18 hours before we can stop the water flow. You know, if it does break out, we can't stop it immediately. You know? So I think that's something that needs looked at. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just address that. We have preliminary runoff water. We've looked at preliminary engineering at this point. As we get further into this, we'll have final engineering that will determine these kind of things. So at this point, we don't have to have that figured out at this point. Impact fees for schools, that's not our responsibility, that's the school's responsibility. And they are in discussions about that, and that will be determined in the SIA. So those kind of things will be spelled out in the SIA. It doesn't need to be addressed tonight.
That ditch runs through town anyway, through houses. Is there an agreement already? That ditch has been there for a long time.
Are you held liable if it goes through by the home right now?
Because it goes right down Hospital Road.
But it's a different society, too. It's a society that has changed as well since it was changed. We all know that, nobody wants to admit it.
But there's no agreement right now for the houses there, right?
There's already houses there.
But as it dissipates coming down, you got less highway. You are right there at the edge of that 1.5 mile of highway. And there's a significant amount of water that comes off that highway.
If I got Shane a question, is Shane still there?
Yeah.
Yes, I'm still here.
On the couch?
Yep.
Is this agreement kind of a thing that you see all over?
It is. It's unfortunately a thing that we see all over. There's, as you are probably also an issue in most places, and so we'll look at that as far as the basements design go, and in locations where groundwater is an issue, we may say no basements. That's more of an engineering discussion that we haven't necessarily gotten into yet on this project. But all the concerns around the ditch are valid concerns, and those are things that we look at when we're doing engineering.
There's no downside to us making that agreement, right? If we were to do an agreement like you guys were asking.
So if you're talking about like the whole harmless agreement, that's more of an attorney discussion that I'm not at all qualified to weigh in on. But as far as the engineering goes, we will look at the ditch, and we will, do our engineering design to make sure that the ditch doesn't impact the development. But I can't weigh in on whether a hold harmless agreement is something that should be done or is done or can be done. That's more of a question for your attorney.
And we're just talking about zoning tonight. So I don't want to get deep into this discussion because this will all be part of the future part of this. You're back.
Madam Chair,
What?
may I? Chuck Miller again. Yes, I understand you're talking strictly about zoning, but these are all things that come into play. So they can be subject tos. You can go ahead and pass the zoning that you're talking about, but you also can add the subject tos. And that's all I believe any of us are asking, is that these are made of record and they're followed through. And you're the ones that put the teeth in that. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think it's important to recognize everyone that's in the room with your concerns. While we do have, it is zoning that we are talking about, I just want to acknowledge that you guys have brought this issue to our attention. It has not gone unheard, but we are needing to focus on the zoning and move forward with this at this time. But please know that we did hear you.
And I would also make a statement that when we get to preliminary plats, I think that would be fair to be able to think, say, we think we should include these in SIA. And so at this point, it's not appropriate.
Which is our next public hearing tonight, so we'll still have a chance to discuss. Does anybody else have any comments about zoning? How about on council? Are there any questions? on
I
council?
do have a question, but I don't know who to address it to. I just have one quick question in regard to the zoning. In the event that we change the zoning so that it's no longer commercial, and God forbid this should happen, but should it happen that, Mr. Stoner decides to pull out of his development projects, we now have this entire space that's no longer commercial use, that it's now residential use. Will that create future issues? So I don't know which one of you guys needs to answer that.
I don't think it creates any type of issues that I can see, because if someone pulled out of this project, there's another property owner, they have the same process to go through as Jay has gone through, so they can make requests as well.
So let's say, just hypothetically again, if this development were not to go through, we rezone it, let's say someone wants to turn it back into a farm field. Are we able to do that in the future if we have to go that route? I'm just trying to...
You would change the zone to environmental preservation, I think it's called, well, I think it's environmental preservation is the agricultural use.
Okay, just so it can be changed in the event that this development does not move forward. Okay, all right, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, so if there aren't, I'll make a couple comments that, I do appreciate, and maybe this is more appropriate for the next part, but I do appreciate that Jay and Shane and even Chad, you're all listening to what everybody's concerns are. We've seen it in the plans, and I do know that they're taking all of our comments into consideration. And part of our council priorities is to improve housing in Brush, and we have to, this is why we're here. This is what we've committed to over the past even the last 4 years that I've been here, is bringing housing to Brush. And so I think it's important that, and it's also important to do it, you know, wisely, and I feel like we are, and I feel like, you know, everybody's committed to making sure that this is a positive development for the city and the people, and so that's my 2 cents. So I would look for a motion to close the public hearing if nobody has any more comments on zoning.
So moved.
Second.
Any more discussion? Roll call vote.
Counselor Stroud?
Yes.
Counselor Klinkhammer?
Yes.
Counselor Garrell?
Yes.
Counselor Lundstrom?
Yes.
Counselor Spradlin?
Yes.
Mayor Sherman?
Yes. And so with that, I would look for a motion on the rezoning of Westwood Village.
I move we approve rezoning for Westwood Village.
As submitted?
As submitted. Second.
Any more discussion? Roll call vote.
Counselor Garrell?
Yes.
Counselor Klinkhammer?
Yes.
Counselor Spradlin?
Yes.
Counselor Lundstrom?
Yes.
Counselor Stroud?
Yes.
Mayor Sherman?
Yes. So next we will move into the public hearing for the proposed major subdivision preliminary plat for Westwood Village. So I will open the public hearing, and we'll have a staff report from Rick Kroglian, Assistant City Administrator.
Great. All right, we're gonna go into the preliminary plat. I just wanna show you, I wish I could blow this up, but unfortunately I can't. We follow the major subdivision requirements of the code. And so just letting you know, this is the sketch plan, site plan of what the development's gonna look like. And you can see the orange are the larger 62-foot lots, and the blue is the smaller, the 52-foot lots. Green space, open green space, which will consist of like a park-like, and then the top part is where the water will run into the storm water. This will be a park, this will be a park, and then this will also be where storm water is held. This is the track, our walking path they were talking about, and so there's great distance between the house end of lot to the ditch, and so that's already been just thought through for that. You have access points from Yellowstone all the way to 34, and then Edmonds all the way to 26 is what the subdivision is for the preliminary plat. So this is kind of a sketch plan, and he goes into showing what the code, this is the zoning part, proposed zoning, there's where it was, I thought I lost it, but it's actually further down. The major subdivision, our code under 16.9.10, this is where we are at this point. So we've gone from a conference to talk about this, so this has been ongoing for 2 years. We have a sketch review where we've talked about it. We moved into a planning zoning meeting. There's no action taken, it's just presenting information. To then now preliminary plat, which was a review, we've talked about it, and here we are tonight, then we went to planning and zoning. They made a recommendation to move forward, and so we're here tonight, is where we are on the chart. So, when you look at our code, I want to just highlight some things that go through this. Your preliminary plat, I can't find my document, so I'm just going to talk through it. Your preliminary plat is the detailed portion of your sketch plan, where now you start working through the details. You have to submit drawings, for example. So I'm going to show you some drawings. They're going to have to show how streets are laid out, so your names of your streets, the widths of streets, the width of plots, individually, plats have to have coordinates so that they can be individually sold. You can't do that until you rezone it, so now that we've rezoned it, now they can submit of how each of their parcels will be individually sold and built upon. So it goes through that, it goes through specifics of how utilities are gonna be laid out, how your water lines are gonna come in, how your sewer line, stormwater, how is that gonna be moved? How is it gonna be your irrigation and all that kind of stuff? Your water when it moves. How is, even when you're first gonna move the soil, what depths and the plat elevations and things like that have to look at. Your city code spells out all of those kind of things. And so what we have proposed is in your packet that you've gotten, you have a section, it's called EP1, and it goes all the way through P28. And this is the detailed report of preliminary engineering of how it's going to be worked out. So this is the documents that we now will take and start thoroughly walking through to make sure this works. We still have a lot of work to do, by the way, but preliminary shows that this development works. And so when you look at the stormwater, it shows, according to the engineering, that it will move into these 4 different areas. And it's supposed to go into the ground, and they design it for a 100-year flood. When major water events, it's designed to do that. So you have your preliminary drawings have been submitted according to plan. Your phases are kind of showing you how that's going to be developed. They kind of show us how they plan to be moving toward that. It goes through the details of how it's going to be graded. So preliminary engineering is very thorough, but it's not final. It allows us to kind of start taking these the drawings, working through them. In fact, Chad and I have been working through them, and we've already found some areas that we're going to have to change. So it's just normal in the procedure. It gives us time to work through, but first we have to have a plan. So they've submitted the plan according to code. Just to keep going, it gives us, I said grading, it shows how that's going to be done. It goes through specifics of how roads are going to be set up. Again, the best thing that helps us right now is we're not looking at a planned unit development like what we said before. This is conventional code. Code determines everything. So we already have all those documents figured out in our code. The widths of roads, widths of lot sizes. So we're kind of looking at that. We're going through, so you had your roads, you have utilities, like I said, wastewater systems, your water systems, lateral, where the lateral, not lateral, what is that called? The lift station, where that's going to go, and how to make sure that it's going to move your wastewater in the right direction to connect into our system. We have, let's see, we've done the wastewater, our sanitary system. And then lastly, as far as the engineering goes, this is the drainage report to kind of show how the stormwater and stuff will flow through the community. We don't move forward unless we have these kind of drawings and details that it's been engineered, signed off and everything. We will take this and vet it to make sure it works. We may have to adjust some things. If they come back and say, that stormwater pond is not sufficient, now that means our lots are going to be adjusted from there. And then once we get those adjustments, now we'll come submit a final plan of how it's been vetted, the engineering works, the plats have been adjusted if need be. If, for example, we find that the ditch easement is much bigger than what we have, they would sign off on the SIA, and then it would be adjusted accordingly to make sure that that's not going to have any issues or detriment to their ditch. So that's where we are. I've showed you some pictures of how the streets are going to be laid out, lot sizes, easements for utilities. You have entrance and access points. feel like the subdivision has been well developed. Another thing that we did mention briefly, but even snow removal, that's something that we have looked at to make sure that the streets are wide enough for our plows to get through. I think something that we'll have to address coming up soon is where we're gonna put the snow. Because once you move it, it's gotta go somewhere. We're not gonna put it in someone's yard. So those things will be worked out, before we submit it back to you guys. But these are the next part of the phase it's the preliminary. The preliminary means we've got all the engineering together. The next step after this gets approved would be to now work out the details of our agreements, specifying, neighborhood or homeowners association guidelines, home styles and guidelines of how homes are going to be built, sewer depths, how many of these parcels have basement capabilities, which ones do not. If we come back with our report saying that this area has a tendency to flood underneath, then we'll end up probably not allowing any of these to have basements. But that will be determined before we even bring that back to you the second time. So we're just in that stage where we have a plan, we're gonna vet this plan to see if it works, and then move forward with an SIA subdivision improvement. We'll then spell out the specific details. So that's what I have. And I know you'll have Jay and Shane maybe speak a little bit more, but I'll go ahead and do the conclusion for the staff report. So again, it's the same stuff that we said for the zoning, but we have reviewed this, we have vetted it very well. We're at the stage where we know that there's more data that needs to come in, but as far as the data that's been submitted, it's been sufficient for what our code requires. It's spelled out specifically in 16.9.10 of what is required for a subdivision, for a major subdivision. They have submitted everything that our code requires. So again, you have 4 ways that you can move forward. You can approve the request as submitted. Second is you can approve the request with conditions. So this would be the appropriate time that if you wanted to add conditions to be placed in the SIA, that would be appropriate. You can deny the request. You can continue the request subject to additional information if you find that something is still not sufficient according to this. So if the council accepts the conclusions from the discussions as presented in this staff report and testimony presented in the public hearing, then staff recommends the following: that City Council would move to approve the preliminary plat for Westwood Village. Keep in mind that items, and I'll just repeat this is what I communicate to the planning board, items that still need to be addressed before final plat, just to make sure there's no misinformation. Subdivision improvement agreement, the phasing and how these public improvements are going to be developed. Final grading and drainage system and analysis and design will still have to be approved by our city staff. Utility plans will still have to be approved. CDOT permission to have access of Yellowstone and 34 will still have to be approved. Coordination with the ditch holders, like mentioned earlier, and making sure that they feel comfortable and signing off as far as easements and allowables. And if you want to include any kind of agreement that would not hold them liable, that would be sufficient. And then tracks for common elements like mail kiosks and signage and things like that. Those will all, again, be on the SIA, things that we will work out for the next step. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Mr. Stoner, would you like to speak?
Hi. Shane, do you want to add to Rick's presentation before I begin?
Yeah, I really don't have much. The information that Rick presented was great and thorough. I think the big things that I want to highlight is, just to reiterate that this is just another step in the process that's required by code. We have to have the preliminary plat before we can move forward with any formal major subdivision plans. And so we've done enough engineering internal to the site to know that we can make the site work, to know that we can drain it where it needs to drain, and we can get the sewer where it needs to go, and things like that. as Rick just mentioned, we don't have all the coordination with CDOT that needs to be done. We don't have a complete traffic study. We don't have all the coordination with the ditch companies that need to be done. And so those are all things that will come. It's just that at the level of the subdivision and the step that we're in right now, those are just items that weren't necessary, and quite honestly, we don't want to do too far in advance, because if you, the council, hate this project the way it looks, we don't want to have spent $50,000 in engineering just to go back and have to redo it. And so that's why, you know, when Rick talks about the appropriate level of design for the step we're in, that's really why. It's so that we can deliver you a product that the council likes and the town likes, and then we can come back and do all the final coordination and engineering during the major subdivision step of the process.
Any questions for Shane?
I do.
Okay, Shane, we have a question?
Hi Shane, I'm Allison Grell. I'm one of the counselors, and I have a question for you. It's going to be based off of the right-of-ways that are coming off of Highway 34. If I'm reading this correctly, we're looking at a 50 to 70 foot right-of-way coming off the highway. Does that sound right?
I can't remember the exact right-of-way width, but the right-of-way that we're showing is per the standards from city code. I would actually suspect that what we're showing there is going to get a little bit wider, because I would think that when we get our final traffic study, we're probably going to have to put in some turn lanes and some auxiliary lanes. And so, again, what we're showing there is preliminary, just based on city standard.
So I think maybe they're...
The understanding that, you know, that intersection, and probably at County Road 26 as well, will have to change a little bit once we get our final traffic study done and get those, any needed turn lanes included in those designs.
Okay, so I think maybe some misconception here, especially when it comes to the ditches, is that these houses are going to be a butt right up to the ditch. And it's clear from here that we have utility easements, and we have ditch easements, and we have right-of-ways based off of CDOT. So despite how the map might look, these are not sitting right up on the road. Okay, I just want to make sure I understand that.
I'm sorry, Allison, I misunderstood you. I was thinking you were talking about the street right-of-way for Yellowstone.
No.
Yes, you're correct. There's a substantial buffer between the top of ditch bank and the current houses, and that's even, what you're looking at is even just to the back fences. You know, it's another 25-foot setback from the backyard to the house. So the house is significantly set away from the ditch. That is correct.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that.
So, I like to say that tonight what we're trying to obtain approval for is somewhat of a two-dimensional drawing. The preliminary plat gives us no permission whatsoever to go building. It just basically says that you approve the two-dimensional design. And so then, once we have preliminary plat approval, then we can proceed to, CDOT won't even really have a serious conversation with us unless we have preliminary plat approval. We also have had preliminary meetings with both ditch companies, which were fruitful and we understand, but we really can't talk seriously with the ditch companies until we have preliminary plat approval. So there's a lot of dominoes that are all lined up, ready to go, but the domino of preliminary approval has to happen first, and then we can really dig into getting the three-dimensionals, the grading and the underground utilities and the ditch crossing. You know, that's a big engineering deal. Crossing Chuck's ditch at County Road 26. We've met with Chuck. We're planning on burying ditch all across our property so that there won't be grass clippings and kids playing and so forth. There will be an underground ditch on our property that goes underneath the entrance onto County Road 26. So we've got, as Rick has articulated, we have a lot to do yet. But tonight we're just asking if we're okay with the two-dimensional drawing. One of the big questions is how does Westwood Village provide housing for the citizens of Brush? Can we provide good quality homes, good quality neighborhood at an affordable price? And frankly, that's really challenging. Development costs in Brush, because of the location, are higher than up and down the Front Range. Home builders' construction costs are higher in Brush than they are up and down the Front Range. And at the same time, the average household income in Brush is lower. So, those don't help make it work. So it is a challenge. Builders need to be able to have a margin on their homes. And they gotta be able to pay their people to work and make a honest day's profit. So it's challenging, but we believe it's feasible. We have to work together as a team. We need to do our part to do a good quality and efficient development that isn't overly pricey. And the builders have to do their part, and it's a team effort. We really need the city's support. If there's anything the city can do to help, it'll help bring better quality homes, what I call site-built homes versus the modular homes. Modular homes serve a purpose. They're not all bad, but what we're trying to do is a good quality site-built neighborhood that the citizens of Brush can afford, and that's the challenge we're facing. The advantages for Brush are many. First of all, having your citizens be able to work in Brush and be able to live in Brush is a great benefit for your citizens. It also increases sales tax. People shop where they live, not where they work. So if they're busing in or driving in every day to work and then they go home, they shop at home. So it will help increase sales tax. It will increase property taxes to the city. I've already met with the school district. They've done their impact study, and we've already agreed on a dollar amount per home that will be tacked on to every building permit. I don't believe that agreement needs to change at this point. I think we've hammered it out with the school district and the superintendent. And but also, I think to some extent in a town such as Brush, where the population is actually, my understanding, it's actually gone down. That's not good for a school district. You really want, as kids graduate, you want new kids. You want a population that grows. That's where the state contributes their money, is based upon student population. The impact fee is one thing, but having more students is actually a good thing. I don't think it's a bad thing in this case. For sure, there's capacity with your new school that more students would be a good thing for the school district financially. And when you have more homes, it encourages other businesses to move to Brush, other retail, other restaurants, and so more homes gives your employer that wants to move to Brush a place for his or her employees to live. So I think the apartments play a role. And we're not talking about the apartments tonight, but having that mix of housing is a good thing for Brush. So in conclusion, we're excited about the challenge of bringing good quality, affordable homes to Brush, and we really look forward to teaming up with the city to make that happen. We can't do it without you, and we're going to do our part to do a great job in making Westwood Village a community that you're going to be proud of. And that's all I have for tonight. Any questions I can answer before I sit down?
I think I just have one question. And maybe Shane could answer this better. Looking at the footage on this preliminary map of the roads, it looks like they're gonna be 60 feet. Is that consistent, it looks like, with what we've already got? My major concern is just making sure that our emergency response vehicles can get through. And that includes in the open spaces, so that they have an access, a way to get back there. You got some kid that's mangled up in a playground equipment, they need to be able to get back there. So that's something that you guys have taken into consideration, it
Oh,
looks
yeah.
like? Okay,
Yeah, we're meeting your widths for road right-of-ways.
okay. Definitely just wanna make sure that we can keep our
So,
citizens
yeah,
safe.
I'll tag on to that as well. The minimum requirement for emergency responders for a sidewalk is 4.5 feet. And the trails that we're proposing through the green spaces will be 5 to 6 feet. So,
Okay.
yeah, we're meeting all of the requirements that are typical for first responders.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
And I'd just touch on the playground. Right now, what we're contemplating is basically, in one of the green areas, we're gonna be, building something similar to what we did in Wigan. It's a little kid play area, and then a little bit bigger kid play area, and a swing set, and then a picnic, shelter pavilion kind of deal with benches, so that, you know, the parents can sit in the shade and watch their kids get a sunburn and
Very nice.
play and have fun. But the new design, I think, is a lot better than our old design, and it's been good working with the staff and Chadwin Cox has been a good engineer as your third-party review engineer. So I think we're looking forward to making some progress on this new development. Thanks for your consideration, and Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll have another public testimony section. Members of the public have the opportunity to make statements either in supportive or in opposition of this ordinance. Anyone addressing council must first come to the podium, and please state your name and address before making your comments. Each party given testimony will be given one opportunity to speak and must direct all questions regarding the application to the mayor. We have more.
Hi, Bart Ginther, 25545 Highway 34, Brush. This is probably more a question than a concern, but we make our living farming just on the west edge of this property, and when the wind blows, especially this time of year, corn leaves and husks and even a few corn stalks, depending on how hard the wind blows. I know Morgan County, when they okay a building permit or a new house going in the county, they make those people sign a right to farm deal so that complaints don't come our way. We can't control the wind, and is it possible that the houses, at least on that far west edge, maybe could be asked to do the same thing? That and I guess the other thing that states is, you know, the farm equipment, the noise. If these people are moving from who knows where, but they're used to living in town, now they're on the very edge of town, and the wind blows weeds or corn stalks or husks into the yard. And I know this for a fact because we've got neighbors that have already complained. Or the smell of manure, if we're spreading manure on the farm for fertilizer. Again, not necessarily a complaint, but just something I'm asking if that could happen, if that you guys could consider that on at least part of the property, that these people know what they're getting into, because they're going to be living on the edge of town, on the edge of country life. So
That's a good statement, because I wouldn't have thought of that.
and again, Highway 34 already has a little bit, and we try to avoid it every chance we can with tractors and equipment. But Road 26, there's quite a bit of times where our farm equipment is up and down that road, and again, as long as the people know what they're getting into, I don't see a problem. But if that's something that you guys could implement, I'd appreciate it.
Bart, just to clarify, that
Yeah.
was a right to farm agreement, is that what you said?
Yeah, and again, the county has a copy of that, and again, I don't know how strongly it's enforced, but You know, when we've even bought farms that had a house on it, they had us sign them.
Right. Awesome, thank you.
We will definitely look into that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Seen that all over Will County as well.
Oh, really?
It's
Okay.
more of a disclosure so that people.
Yeah, it seems like a disclosure kind of thing.
We wouldn't have a whole lot of tooth anyway in going after a noise ordinance and something that's in the county. So I mean,
No.
we're a right to farm community, I think, anyway, so, but yeah, it's something definitely to look into. Sure,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I think
Yeah.
it's a valid point, and it is consistent with what we've seen. It's a matter of putting it on the approved final documents.
Okay.
And it will also address fences, because most likely we'll have fences going around too, so that would stop some of that stuff going in people's yards.
It creates a bigger pile.
You just have to consider where you move to, I think.
You get corn husks or tumbleweeds or your
Yeah.
neighbor's trash, there's always gonna be something.
Chuck Miller, 26060 Morgan County Road S. Thank you, Chairman. Just on that last comment, a suggestion to Jay Stoner is that can be part of the covenants. And it can be put in there and that's the best notification for the residents and protects everybody. Do we, for the record, someone need to reiterate the concerns that were brought up in the previous hearing? So they're at the record of this hearing?
The no fault, the ditch with the ditch company.
Yeah, the release of liability, the hold harmless agreement for the brush lateral.
Is that something that should be addressed tonight or put into the subdivision? I would think it would it need to have more discussion with the ditch company. I think that would be in the discussions between Jay and the ditch company, because, I mean, we could say that has to happen, but then, you know, I know the ditch company takes good care of the ditches, but who's to say that there was some, you know, something that failed that should have, I don't know, it seems like that's a discussion that needs to happen as they're having they're gonna be making agreements with the ditch company. So I think, that will definitely be addressed in those discussions.
As far as citing them for this record, you can certainly, you know, incorporate them by reference, but it's probably cleaner to just reiterate them, just bullet point if you'd like.
Okay, thank you. So, taking that advice, just like for the record to be a release of liability and a hold harmless agreement discussed, I would like to make the record that the City of Brush and the developer and the engineers are invited to the annual Brush Lateral Ditch meeting, which will be held on January 31st at 2 o'clock in the afternoon at the Farmer State Bank boardroom, which is up the stairs. And I guess we need to put on that agenda time to allow presentation or whatever needs to be done. Okay? And then as to my lateral ditch, Jay mentioned in his conversation with you tonight that they had taken in, and we've had discussions that they had taken into consideration. I do see in the plans that what I perceive to be a 25-foot right-of-way for my ditch and for shrubbery and things of that nature. He did say that it would be a buried ditch. What my requirements have been all along is a buried pipeline from the head gate to my property, which takes in Ty Jackson's property, which he's contacted me to finish out his development. He needs another crossing of my ditch. And I have instructed him that there are no more crossings for the ditch. It's an underground buried pipeline from the head gate to my property. Because we can't have Mr. Stoner stop at his property, and then a few feet down, then Ty Jackson putting a crossing over with a culvert, and then a few feet down, he's got his crossing in there originally. You cannot maintain a ditch that way. And also, if it's an underground pipeline, then they can do whatever they want above the ground, and they don't affect the underground pipeline. The current ditch there is required to be V'd, it's required to be sprayed, Yes, I've tried to kill the trees that were planted right next to the ditch, but I can't kill them. I killed mine, but I can't kill theirs. So, it's just a bad situation, and that ditch needs to be a buried pipeline from the head gate to my property. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles.
Anybody else? Any comments from council? Questions? No? So I would look for a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Any more discussion? Roll call vote.
Counselor Stroud?
Yes.
Counselor Klinkhammer?
Yes.
Counselor Garrell?
Yes.
Counselor Lundstrom?
Yes.
Counselor Spradlin?
Yes.
Mayor Sherman?
Yes. So I would look for a decision. We need to make a motion for the decision for the preliminary plat for Westwood Village. Would anybody like to make a motion?
I move we approve the preliminary plat for Westwood Division as submitted.
A second?
Second.
Any more discussion? Roll call vote.
Counselor Klinkhammer?
Yes.
Counselor Stroud?
Yes.
Counselor Lundstrom?
Yes.
Counselor Garrell?
Yes.
Counselor Spradlin?
Yes.
Mayor Sherman?
Yes. All right. Next we have, resolution number 2022-4. Loranda will be speaking for Joanne on this one.
At last meeting, Joanne had you approve, signatures for our new mayor Sherman and our mayor pro tem, Lundstrom, but at the time, we couldn't do the resolution in the same meeting that we named the mayor pro tem. So that resolution is before you tonight, and we're just looking for approval, for the same signatures that we've already submitted the bank signatures.
So look for a motion for that.
I would move to approve resolution number 2022-4, resolution naming signatory authority for bank accounts for the city of Rush. As we've discussed.
Second.
Jinx.
Any more discussion? Roll call.
Counselor Lundstrom?
Yes.
Counselor Garrell?
Yes.
Counselor Spradlin?
Yes.
Counselor Klinkhammer?
Yes.
Counselor Stroud?
Yes.
Mayor Sherman?
Yes. All right, now we have another resolution. We've got Rick Roglian, Assistant City Administrator, discussing development process.
I know you're tired. So this resolution has to do with a letter of incentives for Central School. I'm just going to read off the incentives of what we are proposing, or what we've discussed prior in a work session, and you guys came out with support, but they need a document or resolution in order to pursue grants at this point to show that the city is in favor of this development. And so what we're asking you to make a decision on in the resolution is the city of Rush provides property tax exemption for 5 years, and then 50% reduction for the next 5 years after that. So it'll be 10 years. The first year, or the first 5 years will be, complete exemption, and then 50% after that for 5 years. And I will also meet with other districts in order to see if they would match that. Congratulations, Jerry.
Thank you, Joanne.
Thank you for coming in.
The second is building permits fees will be waived with the exception that no reduction on plan reviews or consultation fees. That's where we have to then talk to a consultant to make sure it's being vetted properly, that's above our pay grade in a sense. Those cost us money, and then we defer that back to the developer. Next, just plumbing and electrical permits. That is done through the state, so we don't do that anyways. Form a partnership between the city and future owner, which we know now that is Ty Jackson, so that the municipal grants can be pursued. They were pursuing a $500,000 grant, but it got rejected because we didn't have this letter in time. So doesn't mean it's rejected for good. We'll just wait for the next round, and the monies are still available. Pursue a phased development. So, for example, phase 1, clean, secure, and preserve the building. Phase 2, renovate all classrooms on the main floor and departments. Phase 3, renovate the south cafeteria wing for commercial use. Phase 4, renovate the north gymnasium wing for commercial use. Another incentive we agreed upon is allow separate certificate of occupants to be issued with a development plan in place so that they can start having people in, but it would not jeopardize any safety issues. So a development plan would have to be submitted to us and approved before we would even allow a certificate of occupancy. And then the City of Brush will provide the necessary exterior infrastructure utility upgrades to water, sewer, stormwater, and fire hydrants. Anything interior with regards to utilities is excluded. That's on them. So just the exterior utilities is what we're saying we're willing to do. And then for the first 2 years, the City of Brush will waive utility fees for water, wastewater, and stormwater. We will not include any trash construction or anything with that agreement. So that is the incentive package that we need a resolution for. Any questions?
No concerns. Well, that's a question, but that answers the question.
Do you have any concerns?
Yeah.
That's what he's asking.
Thank you.
And I just want to say, I mean, it sounds like we're giving them a lot of, like the property tax exemption for 5 years. We're not getting anything on that now because it's a nonprofit that owned it before. So we're not out anything. We're just prolonging when we do start collecting property taxes.
Yeah. And just to remind you, this has been over 20-something years sitting vacant like this.
Yeah.
And the amount of damage to the building is ridiculous. If you walked in, if you've ever seen it, it looks a lot better right now, but right before we had him come in and start, but before he purchased it and we walked through, and then now that he's started already, he's in phase 1 already of cleaning and remediating all the pigeon poop and all that kind of stuff. So they're temporarily right now working through making sure there's no asbestos being removed from the site right now. So they're just working through that right now, but it's, I have no concerns. This is like a tax increment financing, like a mini one that the city's doing for them, but the end product will actually generate taxes. So it will be 39 apartments, I think is what it's worth.
So, yeah, anybody make a motion for this resolution?
Move into 2022-5 resolution approving development of subdivisions.
Second. Any more discussion?
Councilor Wyman?
Yes.
Councilor Cameron?
Yes.
Councilor Stroud?
Yes.
Councilor Durrell?
No.
Councilor Lundstrom? Mayor Sherman?
Yes. All right, we have another resolution, so.
Okay, so it's pretty exciting. Honestly, we're seeing a development that has been sitting idle for 26 years actually come into fruition, and which I'm sure Monty's been around for 16 years. You probably have heard developers come and go, and it's still sat idle. You've seen the chamber try to rally support year after year after year for it only to be denied and sit there. And so we're in a housing crisis. So to add any apartments is amazing from my end of trying to get developers to come. So, which is exciting to see Central School come back. And then now to see another one, which is going to be an affordable housing development right across the street from the secondary campus in the same area where Brush Village currently is. So there's a piece of property which you'll see in your exhibits, which I'll go ahead and show you. If you look at your map, Exhibit A, it shows you where the site location is going to be. In red, it's outlined. This is a proposed 45-unit apartment complex for affordable housing. And so they are asking, this is a combination going after CHAPA funds in order to do this project. And they're going after significant funding from CHAPA to do this. In order to do that, they have to have agreements with the city. So this is like another great incentive package in order to accomplish these kind of things. So in order to, and I'll walk through the incentives in just a second, but I wanted to show you each map shows you where certain utilities are and which things would have to be moved. Unfortunately, where this piece of property is, our city water and city sewer line runs right through the middle of it. So that would have to be moved. No matter what development, the utility lines would have to be moved right. So this property is currently owned by Northeast Colorado Housing, and they would have to have that utility line moved as well, even if it wasn't this group. So they're in the process of buying it from them so that they can have this development. So you see, we have a map of the sewer system. We have maps of how the water moves with stormwater. And then we have a map in the blue that shows where the water is, which also would have to be relocated. If you turn to your letter, the incentive letter, what they're asking for is building permits to be reduced by 50%, no reduction, same as the first group, no reduction on plan reviews or consultation fees. Again, plumbing and electrical permits go through the state, so that we don't do that anyways. Water connection fees will be reduced 25%. Wastewater PIFs will be reduced by 50%. The city of Brush will relocate the exterior infrastructure main lines that are currently going through the property, such as infrastructure that the city will relocate are the main water, the main city water lines, the city wastewater lines, interior utility upgrades, and the 51 housing developments are excluded. So anything internal, that's what they're responsible. We're just saying we're going to help them on the exterior. And we're also asking to allocate $200,000 of our ARPA funds to go towards this development as well. That also meet state and federal guidelines. And affordable housing is one of those that ARPA funds can be used for. So that is the incentive, and this is the request for resolution to send this to them. And this incentive package is contingent on their CHAPA funding right now, so they're waiting on this. I have a letter of support from the mayor, already signed from last council meeting, and the next thing that they needed was the incentive resolution. Any questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
For the ARPA funds, can you just tell me, like, and I know we've probably discussed it before, how much ARPA funds do we have, and why are they getting such a significant chunk of it?
So we have,
I can answer it. The ARPA funds, we're going to be receiving total about 1.4 million. And so what we did is we looked at what projects we might have. We received already 670,000. And so what we looked at was a similar amount to J. Stoner Subdivision for some infrastructure there. So we did the same for this other. We just made it the same. And then there'll be some funds left over for this upcoming year. But then later this year, I think in June or July, we should get the other 670,000.
I have one more question. What is the cost to us having to move those lines?
That's a good question. We tried to determine that, and that cannot be determined because we don't know what's there. We don't have costs for the supply, even the materials, COVID has affected everything, so whatever we thought it was gonna cost is gonna be significantly more than what we thought. So, it could be 50,000, it could be 200,000, we just don't know. To move those lines.
I'm sorry, maybe you guys discussed this when I was out sick, but, I guess my concern here is we're giving them money and we're spending money. So what is the benefit to the city other than the obvious, the housing? So what is the benefit here when we've got all this money going out up front?
So the money has to be spent towards infrastructure, and affordable housing fits under that. And so we can't just spend the money any way we want to. So we prioritize the projects of what would constitute development for Brush. Moving infrastructure is one of them. So by helping.
The other piece, Rick, was those are our water lines already, that they're our lines. So we just said we'll move our own lines and help them move that line. So it cuts through their property, so we're just gonna take them
Oh,
and
no,
scope the outside.
I understand that, but we're putting out money that we wouldn't otherwise be spending to move said lines for their benefit.
We're gonna get property taxes in the future and have housing for people that are, like, bringing businesses and jobs.
And I mean, they've already talked about the Westwood and all that, one of the, hurdle will be the affordability of them. This will be people, to a more of an affordable place to stay in this town.
So,
And
are you proposing using the $200,000 ARPA funds in the moving of the utilities, or that's on top of?
On top of.
That's on top.
It could be used as long as it fits the categories for ARPA funding. So affordable housing fits the guidelines for that, to be able to spend it for that.
So just to make sure I understand the process here, we agree to incentives, and then it moves through a similar process, and we get to a point where we're looking at the same thing that we're looking at right now on the screen. Is that my understanding, that they have to go through all the same steps?
Correct. So that's a good point. Let me clarify something else too. This project could completely fail. And the way it would fail is it would not get funding. If they can't get funding from CHAFA, then all of these things would be reneged. So this agreement would be done. We have in here we've got guidelines to say that. If they even in the purchase of the property, that would then be reneged too. So they're doing all the steps necessary to get funding, but they're still trying to get funding. So they won't know until I think March if they get the funding. Now there's certain preliminary meetings and processes that let them see how they're gauged. They're gauged really high because of how we're working together from a city to this development. They do developments all over the nation. So they came originally to look at Morgan County. They had meetings with all the cities, and they chose to work with Brush mainly because of our interaction from a staff and how fast we were able to turn over things to them. They did not get the same reaction to other cities, therefore they wanted to work with Brush. They would have gone with the same incentive requests to all the cities though. So they have to have, because it's affordable housing, we'll have 2 affordable housing for apartments in Brush, Central School, and then this development with North Point. The one that Jay's proposing is market rate, so that's not affordable housing. So having these 2 would actually fit the gap of what we really need to make sure we're covering the gamut to make it affordable for all of our citizens. So unfortunately, it takes more money for affordable housing because you have to have subsistence. It's going to be federal, state, or local, but you can't build it without subsistence. And so by helping offset that cost, we can get a development here for that.
Thank you for explaining.
You're welcome.
I think this is great. Definitely need it.
Hey Rick, I do have a question.
Okay. Go ahead,
Is
Scott.
this gonna be set up kinda like the Brush Village? I know that, I'm on the Brush Housing Authority as well, and I know that we have a lot of stipulations on getting people into Brush Village. It's a really hard income bracket to really qualify to get people in there. Is this gonna be kind of the same guidelines as well, where they have to follow these guidelines, or is this gonna be kind of more open and flexible to get people in?
That's a good question, and I can't answer that specifically. I know that they will have specific guidelines as well. I don't know what the similar guidelines between the two are, but they will have guidelines to make sure that they meet certain requirements to be able to come in, so that they can, for the income, you have to have showing income to be able to, your guidelines, your gaps to be able to afford this. But just to back up for a second, when they first came to town to talk to me, they asked me what was the biggest issue, and I was communicating to them, it's our working class poor is our hardest to find housing for. It's those who they don't qualify for the housing authority, but yet they can't afford the market rates. So if we can stay between that gap of, affordable, which is right above the stringent, requirements of the housing authority, but below our market rate, that's really a goal. And he said, fantastic, that's exactly what we're going after as well. So I don't know, I've not seen the regulations between the housing authority and what they are, but they will have regulations. So
This is currently owned by the housing authority?
it is not owned by the housing authority. Okay. It's a partnership with the housing authority, though.
Any other questions?
Madam Chairman, a question for clarification.
Okay.
Looks like this is butting right up against the Upper Platte and Beavers augmentation pond, and once again butting right up against the brush lateral. Is that correct?
I see where you're headed, Chuck, and I don't think we're quite even to that point yet of being concerned with those. It still has to go through planning and zoning before we even get to that point. Right now, we're just looking to approve the incentives before we can even move forward with even talking about developing it.
Understood. I just wanted the clarification. Is that
I think
correct?
Dale's got an answer for you.
I'd like to clarify that there is a stormwater pond between this particular proposed development and the augmentation pond. And then there is a pipeline, in that section of property where it's already been corrected.
Pipeline serves what?
Drainage.
Yeah.
Yes, it is brush up, but it's
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll pull a motion on this one.
I would move we approve resolution number 2022-6, approving development incentives for the North Point project.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call vote.
Counselor Stroud?
Yes.
Counselor Spradlin?
Yes.
Counselor Lundstrom?
Yes.
Counselor King-Cameron?
Yes.
Counselor Corral?
Yes.
Mayor Sherman?
Yes. All right, another resolution. Don't make it.
Okay, so, in order to accomplish this project, we have some difficulties. So we've had to work things around. This development started off as 50 units. They could not fit 50 units on the parcel, so they've dropped it down to 45 to do it. Originally, they had the construction of where the apartment was going to go was going to be toward the road, but then we realized that we could potentially run into the easements of the ditch. And it's a huge easement. It's like 60, 70 feet. And so, which runs like halfway through the property. And so, in order to go back to the drawing board, we moved the apartment complex to the back of the property now, and then the parking will be in the front. And it's easy to access the ditch from the front to change parking than it is to actually go into the structure and demolish it per se. So the problem then came to open space requirements, because every development has open space requirement. In this site, they didn't meet the open space requirement. So we came up with they came up with an idea of the property that's right beside this to the west is actually owned by the city of Brush. And it's a stormwater pond in a sense. And one way in order to accomplish this was to do a partnership in a sense where they can do an improvement to the park to make it a park like in lieu of the open space requirement. So to use the land, kind of like what we were proposing for Jay Stoner's last year, in order for him to use the stormwater pond, then he was gonna do all the upgrades of the stormwater pond and provide parks and stuff for Westwood. Well, that's now no longer part of Westwood, because he's doing everything on house. But this group needs the same thing, so they need the space of that land side to the west. In order to do that, they are making the commitments that they will do a bunch of improvements. So if you look on your maps, on Exhibit A is the proposed improvements to that land area in exchange so that they can get the open space requirements necessary for their development. So there in the orange, you'll see that's a whole pathway system around the ditch. And they are proposing having an exercise loop where they'll put stuff in the ground for exercising. And then right to the east of that, you'll see leisure, sports, cornhole, and, things that you can interact with the community. There's going to be a playground to the east of that. To the north, you'll see a garden, like a community garden area. To the north of that, just a great lawn, open space with, kids can play and so forth. So in the red, you can see that's their property boundary line. And then what they're asking is they will do a bunch of improvements along our property, and they will do the maintenance and everything else in order to use that. If you look at the second page on Exhibit V, that's the property of the city-owned property that they need in order to, have an agreement, where number C is the easement to allow them to use the property, all of the property, so that they can have their open space requirements. And they will maintain and keep the pond nice and clean, cut, and they will also keep the pathway systems nice, and all the whatever that they import, they're going to take care of as well. So in order to, that's what they're proposing. What the resolution is it's an agreement that we're saying that we're going to make with them in order to have the access to this land, and that we will grant that, but the condition is that they would have to do the improvements and take care of it. And so that's what this resolution is.
I have one question. We are gonna hold them accountable to this, correct?
Correct.
Cause I don't want some development getting built and they say they're gonna do this based on this agreement, and then we spend who knows how much time litigating it and dealing with it because they fail to follow through.
Correct.
So, I mean, do we have some confidence that this will actually occur?
Dan wrote the contract up for us and put some conditions in there that if they don't meet certain requirements, that the city could actually take it back from them.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, and there's a warranty period in there. I always do a 2-year warranty because the common thing is, let's say you put a pipe in the ground, you have a mild winter, nothing happens. Well, the second year you get a freeze, pipe breaks, that warranty starts over, and they fought me back on that, but I pretty much told them that you guys weren't going to go for it unless we were sure that they could build these improvements and the improvements would be.
Okay, great, thank you.
So, question. So, first off, I love leisure sports. I'm so excited in this. So as we'd be kind of partners with them, could we work together on figuring out what to put in that area? Because I could argue that I imagine citizens might, I don't know, there might be like, oh, we need a basketball court. Yeah.
So the answer is yes, because we're not even there yet.
Yeah.
I mean, in order to, it's like, you gotta go through these hoops in order to get the funding. Once they get funding, now they'll submit the drawings, the preliminary drawings. The SIA would spell that out.
Cool.
Of what kind of specifics are gonna be here. So yeah, absolutely, we can determine if you feel like we should have something there, and the community also communicates things that we can do those things.
Cool, thank you.
Food truck area.
Food truck area, yeah.
Want to get that in
It's
before I
brilliant.
get there.
Correct. Is there any other questions? Great.
Thank you.
All right, I would look for a motion on this one.
I would move to approve resolution number 2022-7, the resolution approving an agreement for improvements in lieu of open space dedication.
Second.
Any more discussion? Roll call vote.
Counselor Burrell?
Yes.
Counselor Lundstrom?
Yes.
Counselor Klinkhammer?
Yes.
Counselor Stratton?
Yes.
Counselor Stroud?
Yes.
Mayor Sherman?
Yes. All right, next we have the 2022 Auditor Monty is going to speak for Joanne today.
Okay, Joanne is out sick this evening, and she asked me to update you on the engagement letter for our normal auditors. Usually it's a little bit less than this year's. This year we're anticipating $20,600 for the auditor's report for the city. It is $4,000 higher than normal because if we accept more than $700,000, I believe, we have to do a single audit on where that money came from. And so our current ARPA funds keeps us right below, but if we receive more grant funds or something like that, that takes it above the 700,000, then we gotta do that special audit. So we're not tracking anything right now, but she put the extra 4,000 just in case, and so it'd be great to get grant money, but if not, it'll be down to the 16,000 or 16,000 for 600. So we just need an approval on that so she can set that up with them.
Anybody have any questions? Look for a motion on that?
Will we approve the 2022 auditor engagement letter?
Second.
Any more discussion? Roll call vote.
Counselor Klinkhammer?
Yes.
Counselor Spradlin?
Yes.
Counselor Lundstrom?
Yes.
Counselor Gorell?
Yes.
Counselor Stroud?
Yes.
Mayor Sherman?
Yes. We've got Rick back with some historic preservation designations.
I feel like you should have just moved chickens into this too.
Oh, that's a darn.
You've been up here long enough.
Almost made it a whole meeting. We almost made it a whole meeting.
I know we though.
You owe me $1.
So this is more lighthearted. I want to tell you a little bit about our code. What did I do?
That's twice you lost something in
No, I was gonna say, I was prepared, I promise. This is lighthearted. This is something that is kind of fun to be part of. I know Dan Scalise, it feels weird not to have him here.
He's right behind you.
He's still here. He's part of this board, and we have a good time in historic preservation. Sometimes we can meet for just hours and hours. But we talk about goals. One of the goals is to create historic districts, and in order to create historic districts, you want to have designated properties that are historic, have significance, to, local historic designation. And so when I look at the code, I'll read what they're charged to do. So it says that historic preservation under section 21030, that's the administrative section. They recommend designation to the city council as historic, a single structure or other feature or integrated group of structures and features on a single lot or site having special historic or architectural values. So that's one. And then the second is recommend designation to the city council as a historic district as an area containing a number of structures having a special historic or architectural value. So that's really their goal, is to add properties to the local that have historic designation and then create a historic district. So that's really, their end goal is to create a historic district they'd like to do. Downtown and around the library is to create a historic district. What constitutes an historic district or a local designated property? So it says in section 21040, a property must be at least 50 years old unless it is determined to have exceptional significance and meet one of the following criteria. So this is what so no matter what property you look for, it has to have one of these 5 criteria to make it significant for our local designation. The first is association of such property with events that made a significant contribution to history. So some type of famous event that took place on that property. Second, that the connection of such property with such persons of history that were significant. So first one is significant event. This one is a significant person. The third one is that the apparent distinctive characteristic or type, period, method, construction, or artisan. So some quality of the house has some significance to it. Number 4, the geographic importance of the property, just where it was located has some significance. And number 5, the possibility of important discoveries related to prehistory or history, like archaeology. You know, something was there that they found, and now the site location can become significant to the city. So we have 3 properties that we have vetted, and it's very fun, actually, to kind of dig the history about some of these properties. So the first one is Shares Tax and Accounting Building, which is 105 Clayton Street. And that one was brought before the board, and we took, you know, none of these were approved immediately. They all were vetted, sometimes long, that they went through History Colorado for their consultation to think through it. They submitted applications. We went to make sure, you know, we looked at the property. What is there anything special to them? And so everyone has something special to them. So Shares was formerly Sammy's Saddle and Western Wear Building, then turned into Deals and Realty Building. This building was built in 1882. And so the outside of Shares may look kind of common, and it was actually the style, according to the history, is American Movements commercial style. I mean, it's basically very plain, but I found that who was in it was kind of cool. So some of the things that it's been over the years, it was a drugstore originally, and then it turned into a barbershop, a creamery, they sold automobile tires. Then it turned into the harness maker and boots and shoe repair. Then it became a real estate office, and then now it's tax and accounting. So I think that's pretty neat to see the years of the building being used really, really well, and it does have significance. It's a very old building. So we decided to move forward with making that a locally designated historic site. So that's the first one.
Where's the horse go?
Yeah, didn't there used to be a horse on that?
You rode that horse, didn't you?
Yeah, I did read in here, it says the horse got shot a couple times.
Oh, really?
And then frequently they put buckets underneath it with real horse manure as pranks. And that happened over and over and over again. And it just kind of that was normal. And then some boys decided to do another prank and steal it. And it was gone. And then also one day it was found in a farm field in the county, but it was in pretty bad condition. And so the owners decided to not bring it back, which is kind of sad, because that would have been kind of neat, great
Yeah.
historic monument there. So, but that was that's the first one. The second one is 122 North Clayton Street, and that is the old bank, which is now an addition renovation project for Brush Dental, is where they're doing that. This building was also, let's see, the historic significance, which I know this is kind of questionable. Is this really significant? But it's in the newspaper that was found in the 20s. So back in 1920, they found that this was Brush's first bank robbery happened in this building. So then it became Farmers, I think it's Farmers State Bank. I can't remember. It's in here somewhere. Farmers State Bank, 1920, shows pictures. Another thing that was pretty significant about this building was the first mayor of Brush was actually the president of the bank. His name was Charles Emerson, and he was president of this bank. So that makes it significant on a couple ends.
That'd be like Emerson Theater, any relation?
Emerson Street.
Yeah, maybe. And then the third one we say for last because it's probably the most significant. Am I right? So this one was approved last month, unanimous with the council. This home, the significance has a gambrel roof, which there's only 2 in Brush. So it's a style that makes it significant for Brush. I think this may be something really interesting that Dan was able to dig up in his research. But back in the 1950s, it was a site of a worm farmer who supplied worms for fishing and gardening. Until this day, and when he digs up, there's still tons of worms in this property. I would also add that this home is very significant to even our modern age, because we've had a mayor that's been 2 terms that's lived there, and a councilman who's been there for 16 years. So it's probably the most government house that we have in Brush.
Not Dan's house, is it?
So I think, and he found Sanborn maps too of, the original site location. I think that's pretty cool. Did a lot of research. And the home was built in 1910. So.
Oh, serious, it's not Dan's house, is it?
It is.
Yes.
So it's funny that you said that, because you had said your second point of historical significance was a person who is significant and served in Brush. And I was like, I was gonna say at that point,
That's why I saved the
it
best
should
for
be
last.
Dan's house.
So yes, was it famous for a worm farmer? Probably, but now we have serious
Back in the day.
significance with this.
Godfather lives there.
The Godfather.
The Godfather.
I'm gonna throw you a curveball. What's the other house with the same roof design?
Where is it? I would defer to Dan.
It's, one block west. It's on the corner. It's a yellow house.
Okay. I think I know which one you're talking about.
It's on Turner and Edmonds. Gambrel.
So with that said, is there any questions, any more questions or comments or feedback?
So is it,
So cool.
sorry, just real quick. It's just simply a designation, and then we can move something. There's no drawbacks. There's no building. You can't do any, like there is for, I think it's the
So
state.
yes. So once a home becomes locally designated, then there are historic guidelines that now overlay on that structure property, and it mainly pertains to the exterior, like the facades and things like that, so that they was preserved properly. It allows them some great things though. They can go after historic tax credits and get some grants and funding from historic sites. So History Colorado has grants that they put out. So it allows them to get some money in order to continue to upkeep for the maintenance of the building or
Sweet.
structure. Yeah. So there's reasons why people want to do it. Our code is spelled out really good. We try, anytime that someone would have to do some upgrades, it would immediately come before the Historic Preservation Board, and then they would vet that to make sure it's appropriate materials, and then they would still have to agree upon it before it even moves to my department for a permit. So I couldn't issue a permit without moving it first to them if it's locally designated. And also, we have currently added a couple questions on our permits asking, is your property historically designated? Because if it is, then that's an indication so that we move it back to the Historic Preservation Board to make sure that they have some type of feedback and vetting appropriate materials for that.
Cool.
So everyone that owns the property has requested this, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. No one's forced to do this. It's their discretion. Yeah. Good.
All right, thank you. Does anybody have any reason why we couldn't vote on this in 1 month vote? Does anybody have a problem with one or any other? So I would look for a motion for these designations.
Do you want me to give you the addresses again?
We have them
No,
on
they're
our,
on here.
we have them
Okay.
on our
I
agenda.
move that we approve the historical designation for 105 Clayton Street, 122 Clayton Street, and 220 Custer Street.
My second.
Any more discussion? Roll call vote.
And for clarification, it was 122 North Clayton, or it's just Clayton, isn't it? Not North Clayton.
It can be Clayton, it's fine.
It's just Clayton, yeah.
Counselor Lundstrom,
We're voting.
Oh, yes.
Counselor Garrell,
Yes.
Counselor Spradlin,
Yes.
Counselor Klinkhammer,
Yes.
Counselor Stroud,
Yeah, yes, sorry.
Mayor Sherman.
Yes. Okay, next we have board appointments. So some of these, well, we'll just start at the top. Some of them I'm gonna be looking for maybe some volunteers if you would be interested. So the boards that we need, We've got Golf Course Advisory, Planning and Zoning, Brush Housing Authority, and Morgan County Library. For the Golf Course Advisory, we had Dan Scalisi, so we need to find someone else. Lance has requested that we have someone who, doesn't golf. So, if anybody would like to volunteer for to be the council liaison for the Golf Course Advisory?
I think Larry doesn't golf.
But,
Yeah, I'll do it.
okay. So we've got Larry. And then we still have 2 vacancies on that board. So if there's anyone in the public who might be interested in serving on that board, we do have vacancies.
I'm sorry, which ones did we need to fill tonight with us?
That one, the next one is, let me see.
Planning and zoning.
Oh, planning and zoning. I have appointed Justin. We get a mayor appointed, and then we get a council appointed, which I was that person, but I'll take Rick's spot. So we still need one more council person, a council appointed person, if any of you would be interested in planning and zoning.
I volunteer as tribute.
Alright, everybody okay with that one? Okay. And then, let's see. The next one is, Scott Klinkhammer will be the council liaison for Brush Housing Authority. He actually joined that in December, or was asked to join. And so he's got the same voting privileges as a council liaison as he did before. Yeah. So there are vacancies on that board too, I think. They kind of do their own, they set up their own board, so if you're interested in that board, just get a hold of us, we can direct you in the right direction. And then...
Yeah, they're looking for one more person for sure.
How many? What? One more person? Okay.
For sure one more person is needed.
Okay. I guess it could be a council person. They just wouldn't be, if somebody up here was interested in doing that.
I would be potentially interested. I guess let's see what else.
Okay. And really the next one, Allison's already on the East Morgan County Library board, so we'll just renew your term.
Cool.
Yep.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy that board immensely. They're a great group.
And I think that's it for council appointments. So would you want to do
Yeah.
Brush Housing Authority?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. We will let them know. Okay, and then Historic Preservation Board reappointments. We've got David Lawrence and Dan Scalisi, who has agreed to continue his term. Into my paper. There we go.
See, I thought you were just here because you couldn't get enough of us.
Just when you thought he was out there doing it.
I didn't tell you the golf advisory board is 7 a.m.
You know, that's fine. I'm up at 3, brother.
PM.
Let's see, I'm so glad you wrote this down. And then the tree board appointment, got Randy is it Ide? Ide? Okay, yep. I have you down on the, appointed to the tree board. I think there was something else we were gonna talk to you about, but I won't do it right now, so. Unless I should. And I think that, should I read them all? Or, no? Okay. So I would look for a motion for those board appointments.
We would move we approve the board appointments as discussed.
Second.
Any more discussion? Roll call vote.
Counselor Garrell,
Yes.
Counselor Spradlin,
Yes.
Counselor Klinkhammer,
Yes.
Counselor Stroud,
Yes.
Counselor Lundstrom,
Yes.
Mayor Sherman.
Yes. Whew, been stressing over that for like 2 weeks. All right, so we have Dale Colrick to talk about a bid for,
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Part of our wastewater 2022 capital improvement projects is the replacement of the irrigation sprinkler pivot out at the English farm, which is part of, right next to, adjacent to the agri park. It's made out of galvanized steel, and it's starting to flake off iron pretty regular-like, and it's starting to notice signs of wear and tear. It's fairly old sprinkler. And so we went out and got bids. We're looking at, we had 3 of them, all deemed complete. Zematic submitted one. We were looking for aluminum, however, they don't have aluminum at this time and can't get it, so they offered us an alternative of stainless steel for $106,472. But I put the aluminum one on there just as a matter of comparison, if they could provide us with one. And then Ranke also provided one for aluminum, and it was $97,171.82. And then Valley had proposed one that was a polyline galvanized pipe. However, in looking at it for that $570, even though that might be the lowest workable pivot, it only has a 6-year sprinkler. There are some people in the agriculture community that really don't prefer them. And so with that, I am recommending that we award the Ranke the aluminum sprinkler for $97,171.82. We budgeted $100,000 for this particular replacement project. And with supply chain being what it is, I've really encouraged a lot of my staff to get your capital improvements. Get them done, get them in, get them done now, because of course inflation coming up. This is a case where one company couldn't even get the aluminum, so we're fortunate that somebody else can do that as well. So anyway, that's staff recommendation.
very good.
Just out of curiosity, what was the warranty on the stainless steel one?
I didn't go there, you know. It was in the book, but it was over what we had to spend.
Oh, okay.
So
Fair enough.
stainless lasts for a long, long time. My favorite. But that's Cadillac. I mean, this
Yeah.
would be a Cadillac sprinkler. And none of those farmers drive Cadillacs.
That's only a half circle too. Right?
Yes,
So your value is kind of less the more time you cut the circle. So, and who knows how long we'll even farm the place too, so you don't want to put too much into it.
Good.
Okay.
Thank you, Dale.
Thank you.
I would look for a motion on that one.
I move we approve the Ranke aluminum for $97,171.82.
Second.
Any more discussion?
Yeah.
Roll call vote.
Counselor Klinkhammer,
Yes.
Counselor Stroud,
Yes.
Counselor Garrell,
Yes.
Counselor Lundstrom,
Yes.
Counselor Spradlin,
Yes.
Mayor Sherman.
Yes. All right, number 8, we have finance.
I move we approve disbursements and payroll for January 11th, 2022 through January 2022 totaling $410,719.80.
I second.
Any discussion? Roll call vote.
Counselor Stroud,
Yes.
Counselor Klinkhammer,
Yes.
Counselor Lundstrom,
Yes.
Counselor Spradlin,
Yes.
Counselor Garrell,
Yes.
Mayor Sherman.
Yes. All right, staff reports. First up, we have Rick Kroglian, Assistant City Administrator. You said enough? All right, Chief Boss.
Good evening, Council. I won't say anything. Most of what I have will be covered on the work session, but 2 things real quick. I would like to invite any new counselors, returning counselors, position changing counselors, mayor, come ride with us, come tour the police department anytime you like. We are generally open all the time, so we'll work around you guys, but please come visit. And then the second thing, we have been trying to get this scheduled this month, but we will be doing our swearing-in ceremony next month, February 3rd at 6 p.m. right here. So if you're interested in attending, that'll be short, maybe 30 minutes. We have 4 officers that will get sworn in at that time.
That's February 3rd?
Yes, sir.
Can I ask you a question? Why do we not do that as part of our council meetings like the other cities do?
I think we used to.
There's a lot of questions about that. In the past, we sent people down to the hall just to have them sworn in with the city clerk. Just kind of got it out of the way. We've never been really formal with it. And so as I've dug into this, we have 2 officers who never got sworn in when they were hired. Which there's no legal issues there, to be honest with you. It's mostly tradition. So we're trying to get everybody done at once so that we get caught up, and then in the future, if we have one at a time, we're happy to do that during council meetings. But my goal is just to get everybody caught up and finished.
Okay. February 3rd at what time?
6 p.m.
To add to the chief's thoughts, when I first started, I went around with him and the other department heads, and that was the most valuable thing I've done. Getting their perspective and everything is helped tremendously, so I would highly recommend it. Scott?
You can come back anytime too.
Thank you, I'll take you up on that.
Thank you.
Thank
As
you.
long as I'm not in the back seat.
You already went for a ride.
For once.
That's how you get started. It's a full perspective.
All right, next we have Dale Colrick, Director of Public Works.
Like Chief, most of everything I'm going to touch on is in the work session, but I just do want to catch you up to date on our glass recycling. I have contacted an outfit that will actually take the glass recycling. The intent is to use that same container that got abandoned here. We'll clean that up a little bit and utilize that. One of the obstacles we have right now is looking at, this is a roll-off type of dumpster, and we don't have the ability to transport roll-off dumpsters to Broomfield, where this company is. It's called, I forget the name of it right off the bat, but I did talk to them a little bit, and they will provide us with anywhere from $25 to $30 a ton type amount for the glass that we bring in. They actually use that for creating cullet, which they take to bottle manufacturers, and they actually recycle a lot of it here in Colorado. And so upwards 40% of a glass bottle, that brown bottle, has been recycled already. So we'll be hopefully moving forward with that. We're going to look at some local haulers. I know some of the oil patch companies, they can handle roll-offs, so can some of our waste disposal companies here in the city as well. I don't have those figures back yet as to what it's going to cost to transport it up there, but at least we'll get a little bit of offset from the cost of, for the rebate, or should I say, for the glass itself. Other than that, it's going to snow tonight, and crews are standing by.
Question for you, sir.
Yes.
Question for Dale. So I think I talked about this forever ago when I first started, but is there any consideration to a crosswalk somewhere in Edison, like near the grocery store around there? Because, you know, someone in a wheelchair will have to cross it like almost over here in order to get grocery store over there.
That would be a CDOT consideration.
Is it? Okay.
Yes, that's CDOT. That's not the city's jurisdiction.
Okay.
In that matter. So,
Complaining accordingly. Thank you, sir.
okay. I'll give you contact.
Would you please? Thank you.
We can always count on you, Kevin. All right, Loranda, City Clerk.
Just a reminder on Jerry Dahl, the training dates that I reached out to you all for last week, one of them being February 3rd. So if that would be the best date for everybody, we could put together a city council meeting as well and have the swearing-in ceremony at the beginning. But that's one of 3 dates. I think they were the 31st and the 2nd and 3rd. So if you wouldn't mind, could you please get back to me either this evening or first thing in the morning so that we can get that lined up. Jerry, his dates go fast, and so he was encouraging us to get that figured out as soon as possible. The next thing is the annual electronic stipend. You each had a form at your place tonight for you to turn in when you can. And then the chamber banquet, their annual banquet is this Thursday at 6. Tomorrow is the RSVP deadline. If we could have that in by noon. Anyone who wants to go, then they're +1. We can go ahead and get that in. And then the last thing to talk about is the Ward 1 vacancy. The deadline for the letter of interest is this Friday. We already have a couple in. And so then we'll be looking at the timeline on that for a meeting to meet with the candidates. That's all I have.
Dan Krob, City Attorney.
Just real briefly, I apologize for all the resolutions that I fed to Rick, but thanks for your patience. And just since Tad wasn't here, there was some lack of communication with the new fire truck, so I got together with Ray and Tad, and we kind of drafted a letter that now they're communicating, and it looks like it should be done the 28th, hopefully. That's it.
Couple items. I already talked about ARPA funds, but I forgot to mention that there's also a webinar this last week, and it was a really good webinar because the Treasury Department put out new rules on how you can use the funds. And I'm going to have Joanne was out, but I'm going to have her listen to it as well because they're supposed to send that recording out. But my understanding is they used to have the 4 or 5 different ways that Rick was talking you can use the funds. But for small communities, it sounds like they're going to give you the ability just to take the money and utilize it according to any normal government processes of spending, right? So it should give us a lot of flexibility in how we do it. And more importantly, for small communities, they're supposed to be doing a streamlined reporting process for those too. So instead of doing a whole bunch of reports for Joanne, it might be a one-time and you're done. So that's really good news. Other thing, talking about the fire department, met with the chief and the assistant chief, and we're going to catch Chad Cox this week because one of the things that we discussed was the cost of putting the facility out at the Brush Agro Park. And we're going to look at it and see if it's possible to put the training facility right behind the fire hall. And it's on the fringe of the floodplain, but I think that because the type of building or structure it is, we should have some wiggle room there. But we're talking about the pros and cons of it, and thought we'd just have Chad look at both sites and, engineering wise, which one would be better, probably less expensive there. So change in the plan there potentially, just want to keep you guys in the loop, and we'll see where that discussion goes. The only downfall that we could see was, or that I could see was, burning there, burning stuff in town. Didn't know how many times you're gonna do this, how much smoke it's gonna cause. Also, when it's all nice and brand new, it'll look probably pretty decent, but as it rusts over time, it could become an eyesore. So something else to think about. So we'll do the study comparing the two side by side and see, and check with code too, see if it's gonna work with code as well.
One in Kersey seems to be kept up pretty well. The one in Kersey, when you drive by, it seems to be kept up pretty well, so.
Oh, theirs is a nice one.
There's
These are little boxes. But we'll
They do have the Connex.
They got the Cadillac.
They do have the Connex boxes at Kersey.
Oh,
They
do
have
they
a
have them?
setup very similar to the one that's being ordered.
Okay. So anyways, that's a new change for council.
Okay. Mayor and council reports. Does anybody have anything?
Two things, actually. You had a great idea you didn't bring up about the recycling, Dale. You were talking about making videos to kind of teach people how to.
Oh, yeah.
I was gonna take credit for it, but she's sitting right there, so it'd be awkward,
Yeah, but I've slept since then, so I've
She
totally.
delegated you to take credit.
Yeah.
That was. We were bad-mouthing Kevin one day and it just kind of popped out. That's the important part we were talking about.
Productivity.
Well, I think that's a great idea. That's something we should
Yeah, we
look
talked
into.
about just making like a fun video maybe with all of us, just kind of showing things you can and can't recycle, and maybe just putting it on Facebook, putting it on the website, and
one of the issues we have right now is education, and
that
we're
would-
gonna be working, now that we've got the new year, new budget, we're gonna be working on some better signage and, potentially even having someone actually sitting there at some point in time. We have an individual who we can, currently spare at this point, and as people come in, maybe hand them out flyers and have him coach
Yep.
these individuals, but the video would be a great thing as well.
That would go right along with that training. That'd be fun, so, yeah.
Also, it's been a crazy long, meeting, but, kudos to you, Rick, really. This is awesome, man. You did a really good job. I can imagine how stressful this is for you to get all this coordinated and everything, so thank you. I know you're just doing your job, but thank you for being so
Yeah,
good at it.
it's obvious.
The last nice thing I ever say to you, so it's but
It's
thank you.
obvious you put a lot of time in it, so.
Yeah. And you care.
Appreciate it.
We can tell you care.
Anybody else?
Hey, I've got a continuation of last week.
Okay.
So nobody could probably hear me last week, and important people weren't here. Core requests. This is me banging the table. I think we need to look. We talked about this last year, and we kind of we're average or whatever. I think that we need to address them again, because I think that we definitely are higher than we could be. And I don't think any bump in the road is acceptable for, the public getting information from us. We want to be as clear and transparent as possible, even if it's $30, and it doesn't need to be $30. I think we can look at that. I spent my last 2 weeks talking to city clerks about this in surrounding towns, and Morgan County and Adams County, and I don't think we're even comparative to them. Most of the people I've talked to, so I'd like to address this again. And I can give you all my research already if it helps.
Do you wanna
Yeah.
get together with Gloriana? She doesn't have
Sure.
anything else going on.
Yeah, no, yeah. I can definitely do
And
that if you're.
maybe
And I'm sorry, what was the
Maybe you can
topic?
put something
Core,
together.
open requests.
Open records requests?
Yeah.
Maybe
Oh.
put together a chart of kind of what you might
Yeah,
propose.
exactly.
And
Yeah, that would
keep
kind of help, because I've seen that abused as well,
Yep.
where they're asking for $7,000 worth of documents, and then it starts to kind of add up, so.
And I mentioned last year, when I was with Adams County for elections, we had a gentleman who requested every ballot image every year. It was just kind of his thing. He was a fun guy. But whereas we would do them for, cost of the paper and all that, some counties would do $100,000 just because they didn't want to deal with it. And in their rules, they could do that. And that was them directly not wanting to give access to them. So I want to make sure we're as transparent as humanly possible. So, please and thank you.
Just while we're doing this, I do have a bunch of policies
Yeah.
throughout the state, just let me know what I can see.
Thank you, sir.
Didn't we do this from like 2 years ago, 3 years ago?
Well, and we've got a really good resource too, the CML listserv, at no cost, and they're very responsive. So I would like to use probably that first, and then see, simultaneously to see what you
Sweet,
have
yeah,
as
I'd
well.
appreciate it.
So just so I understand, I wasn't at the last
Yeah.
meeting. So are you thinking that we're too expensive?
Yes.
Or?
Like, for example, even if we're in line, for example, I think for a thumb drive, is $30. Our thumb drives, I'm sure, cost $3. So that kind of stuff, where even if we're in line, we can do common sense things to make it more accessible for the citizens.
Maybe even if we just had like the first 2 per citizen, cheap, but after that, the price starts going up.
Well, technically, in the rule or the law, it's the first half an hour of research is free. There's no staff time cost. And I forget if
First hour.
First hour? Okay. And I forget if there's paper costs associated in that first time or email. But there is a way to make it cheap initially if it's a simple request. But like I said, the outliers like the thumb drives, the CDs, that kind of stuff, I think we could at least address those, at the very least.
I think I do have something I want to say. I'm sorry that I was not here at the last meeting. I'm pretty sure you guys did not want me to share COVID with you. I tested before I came today to make sure I was in the clear, and I'm doing a lot better, so I apologize for not being here on such a significant meeting. But I would like to formally congratulate the first female mayor of Brush, and that's pretty significant, especially from where I sit as a counselor and being a female, so congratulations.
Thank you. I thought I was gonna get through this whole meeting without crying.
That's the great thing about being, you know?
Meetings are much shorter with the other mayor, I'll say that.
Yeah, I know, I'm off to a good start.
Meeting adjourned.
All right, so we'll adjourn the meeting and move into a work session.
Short work session